Start with the roll call.
Morning. How you doing?
Nancy Knight, member.
Bob Gilbert, member?
Ray Kachasky, member.
Cindy Pecos, member.
Wendy Rathgeber, alternate.
Henry Nolowitz, alternate.
You will see both alternates. Give it-
She's saying she got here on time.
Oh,
Early.
You're
Still
on time,
7:59.
running early.
Yeah, the meeting starts at 8.
I know, but it's 7:59.
Someone
Got here a minute early, wouldn't give her
Why did
a
you
break.
pay extra to get there?
We need an eye time clock there.
Do the,
That's a 17-minute improvement. Come on, give her credit.
review and acceptance of the minutes of September 11th. Anybody have any comments?
You build a great
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, I have one, and I wasn't even here.
Oh, fair enough.
I didn't start the meeting.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, you did. It's just a typo. Terry.
Oh, that was your comment.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's right.
it says, Ray
That's
Kachasky
right.
called the meeting to order.
It was
Oh.
Terry.
on page 2, the last sentence.
What line?
Oh, I'm sorry. Line 65. It's got the cross-country ski trail at the base of the hill was places to the side. Maybe
Placed.
placed. D instead of S. And on line 72, requested by the planning board were included in this application and felt it was
Not.
No.
not complete.
Yeah, it should be not.
Wait.
Sorry, I
Or
got-
included, and he felt it was now or not?
Yeah, probably now,
Now.
because
No.
we voted on it.
Right, yes, it was now complete.
Now.
That's all I have.
Any other comments? You have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the minutes of September 11th
As amended,
as amended.
I'll second.
Have a second?
Wendy?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Privilege of the floor.
Oh, can I just interject one thing too? It didn't make the agenda, so we didn't quite communicate well, but Mark Kane should be here around 9 o'clock to help
Okay.
review.
Okay.
Bob Wiles and I are gonna work on the subdivision and site plan for the balance 3 lots and 3 buildings at Green Peak. And before we start, we'd like to clarify what the parking requirement's gonna be. And we'd like to provide 2 parking places per unit plus garages. And the parking will be either exclusive to the 2 units if they're in front of the garages or common if they're not. But we would like to know where the planning board stands on that before we start doing all of the engineering and planning.
Could you further explain what the lots, and are you building on 3 separate lots?
Three,
That-
if you remember the
Right.
phase plan that we looked at before,
Right,
there were a total of 4 lots.
yep,
So we'll be looking at the last 3.
okay, with like a triple set of condos on each, or 2 on each, or?
We haven't made a final decision yet.
Okay, all right.
So you'll have, will these units have single or double garages or what's,
They may have no garages, they may have 1 garage, they may have 2 garages per unit.
and that unit will have, let's say it's a 1 unit, no garage, will have 2 spots?
Right.
Okay.
Dedicated to that unit?
If it doesn't, if they do not have garages, the parking spaces will be shared in common. They won't be limited common area.
Okay.
If they're in front of a garage door, they will be limited common area to that specific unit.
So let's say I've got a unit with 2 garages. I'm gonna have 4 parking spaces in that 2 unit garage area?
You'll have two 2 spaces in the garage and 2 spaces outside of the garage.
So total of
No, that's a total of 4.
4, wait a minute.
2 in the garage, 2 outside.
Look at ours.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think the basic question here is whether or not the limited common spaces count, which were approved on the first phase.
If they count it as parking
Yeah.
spaces?
Yeah, because the big discussion
Yeah, they
was
did.
whether or not those count as the 2 spaces, the limited.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
The,
that's what was approved,
Right,
and I think that's what you're looking for the clarification on.
right. But they had to be limited common area because they're in front of somebody's garage.
Yeah.
Are you having common parking areas at different locations for the overflow, or what's happening? No. So what happens if I've utilized all my spots?
Same thing that happens when someone utilizes all their spots at any other condo project that has 2 parking places per unit.
But other condos have overflow
Yeah.
parking.
A lot of them were only designed with 2 spaces per unit. That's the requirement.
Well, I think we're tied to our regulations. I mean, we require 2 spaces for a 3 or 4 bedroom unit.
Okay, so if we go and do all the engineering with 2 spaces per unit, we will have met the parking requirement.
Can I ask just a technical question, because I haven't been through this? So what would happen, say we're going through this study, January, have a big discussion, get something completed, or maybe December, get it completed for January to get into town meeting that would change the parking regulations. By us stating this today, would
They
that cover them for
That's a good point.
later next year? How would that
Well,
work?
I don't think it would, because this is just a discussion. Nothing's binding.
Right.
Okay.
It's difficult to look at without looking at it,
Yeah,
It's hard
I
to
agree.
answer.
to make some decisions
agree.
about it.
And it's hard to answer
Right.
until we
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I see, and as Ray said, we're bound by the regulations, but the only thing I see as a person who lives in one of those types of condo situations where you can run out of parking is that if the people with garages have limited common rights to the parking outside the garages, which makes sense, and then the people without garages only have the 2 common area shared, it seems like it's not enough somehow. I don't know how that works with the regulations,
that's-
but it just seems like it's not enough.
Mark, can I ask you a question from a standpoint of safety? If Chris was here, I'd ask him. Let's say that these condos are built and the parking requirement is according to our zoning, and people come in and park wherever they choose, obstructing emergency vehicles being able to get around, or plows, or whatever. What happens at that point? Is there any recourse from the town?
No, it
It's a
depends
pro-
on whether it's an internal road or
Yeah, right.
an
If it's
access
an
way
approved
or
road,
whatever. Yeah.
But from a fire,
They're probably gonna get pushed out of the way in an
Okay.
emergency.
okay. I just wondered how that worked.
I mean, it's kinda like parking beside the fire hydrant in the city.
Yeah,
Your windows get broken and the hose gets put through the car.
Great.
I mean,
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
you do what you need to do.
I hope
in-
not.
You do what you need to do in the emergency,
Yeah,
so.
right.
If the fire truck needs to get through, it's big enough,
It'll
it'll move it out of the way.
It was just a question I
You
had.
know, when we entertained and got through with when the Timbers project was being proposed, which no longer is, but, and there was a lot of discussion about parking there, and they had the 3 buildings or 4, or whatever it was going to be. And we made a determination at that time that they needed some overflow, so they took some extra couple of spaces in the units based on an overall plan that we could see. I for one just have a problem with not seeing an overall plan so we can look at that parking intelligently enough to see if maybe a couple of additional spaces for overflow should be placed somewhere. I mean, I know what the regulations say, but a lot of condominium complexes around here have, such as the one I live in or where you live in, is big parking lots. I mean, you know, you can park
Yeah,
like
North
wherever,
Base,
but you
yeah.
start building units like this and they're given and they're right on the road and there's no other
It's-
place to park unless you wanna drive your car in the woods, I guess.
Yeah, tight.
Makes it a little bit more difficult, more challenging.
I live there, and,
You know, this is a little confusing because you're not on the board.
oh, I'm sorry, I was
No,
moving
no,
to the
you can
floor as a
speak.
person, you know.
You can
I
speak,
can sit over there
but I think you should be out in the audience just to make,
just for this one. That's
Just-
fine, not a problem.
we're not shutting you off.
No, no, not a problem.
I just
I
want to keep
understand.
it clear that you're not speaking
I-
from the board's.
I understand, I understand. I live there, and I've had parties and there's been not an issue, but I've always told people that if we need more parking, to go into the last row of Black Bear. It's a large area. And they never park against the woods there, you know. So I've told people to do that.
Yeah. Hold on.
You can tell them to go park at Town Square too.
Yeah. And in the wintertime when it's 0 degrees, anyway,
Yeah, anyway.
that's,
That's-
I'm just bringing it up that.
No, I agree completely. I feel a lot more comfortable if there was another couple of spaces somewhere.
Well,
Yeah,
the
'cause-
fact that they're limited common area really cuts down the parking even
Yeah.
more, because you can't park in front of somebody else's garage,
Exactly.
even if they're not there.
And then depending on the amount of snow, you know, we got, and is where you would put that snow, you know, it could even cut it down even more.
You're not getting an answer.
Well, you know.
It's by the regulation.
Yeah, that's
We're-
right.
We're finding getting the engineering work done is really,
Yeah.
really a costly thing. And
No,
I don't think either Bob or I, as much as we'd like to start more development over there, which I think is good for everybody, I don't think we want to put out the capital outlay only to find out that the parking issue, you know, carries on for months and delays the process.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate your
Just doesn't-
position,
just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
but I think Wendy hit an excellent point that we're in the process of getting this results of the study, and part of it's gonna be parking, so we may have some clarification in the next month or so. But right now, I think it's premature for us to give you a definite answer, which wouldn't be binding anyone.
Okay. That was inviting.
Joe?
Question I have, as a developer and a builder, you know, I've built in probably 30 towns in my 30-year career. It's extremely frustrating and difficult for me, whether it's Waterville Valley or it's Concord, Massachusetts, to have a set of regulations that I can't use as my guide to create my engineering plan. And you know, to spend $5,000 or $6,000 every time to come in with my engineers, to find out that I followed the regulations to a T, did exactly what was written in the regulations, and find out that it's unacceptable. I know that a lot of people might say, I want 2 more car spaces, or I want, 6 more. But the regulations are the regulations. And I'm not, if the regulation said 6 spaces per home, then that's what we'd have to design around. But, it's right now, we want to move forward. And our goal today was to come into this meeting and get clarification from the board that said, yes, we're gonna follow the regulations. That's all we wanted to hear. We weren't looking for a plan approval because we don't even have anything for you to review to approve. But it appears now that I'm gonna walk out this door and have no idea what the requirements are, which, I mean,
Well, right now, the regulations are two parking places per unit. And I think the question is whether or not those limited common ones should count as a full parking place outside. Because it's complicated, it's further complicated because you have garages on the first phase. So people actually have 4 places.
Which
I
would
think
be
we owe
benefit-
you an answer on that. I really believe we do owe you an answer on that. But I think the general consensus of the board is that we'd like to see some overflow parking, no matter what the requirement is.
I think it seems to me, and I completely understand your frustration, it drives me crazy that we can't say, of course, this is what it is, because it's written. I think as a board, we've been struggling and realized we needed help, and we finally are getting the help this year, and we're just in that process. It seems to me we're just trying to be honest in our
Right.
in our assessment of what would be needed, and I share your frustration completely, but we're just trying to be honest. And I'd hate to say, of course we're going to follow the regulations, and then something happens at town meeting and it's changed, and you bring in your plans in April and say, okay, here's what you said would be okay, and then it's right after the regulations have been changed. I think it's just a matter of trying to be honest as possible.
Right, the question is, 'cause and this had nothing to do with town meeting, we were planning on coming in a lot sooner than town meeting. Because if everything went, you know, and being a speculative builder, you know, in a perfect world, I'd like to be digging foundations in March or April. So obviously I'd have to be in a lot sooner and have approval from this board. So I would be before town meeting. So I wouldn't be waiting for that. But I think the reason Bill and I came in is we did want clarification, because if we're spending this money, that, you know, we're not gonna be put, you know, on hold until other decisions have been made. So I guess,
Next, Mr. Chairman, next month, the planning board will have the language that will be put to public hearing. After the public hearing, they'll do one of 2 things. They'll either vote to modify that language,
Right.
or they'll vote to move it forward to town meeting. That'll happen in December.
okay,
If they vote to move it forward to town meeting, it has the effect of law,
Right.
of being an ordinance,
right,
unless it's overturned at town meeting. So you'll know by December
okay,
what the regulation is. And, well, you'll actually know by November what they wanna have as the
Right.
language.
right. Well, that
So
helps
by
me
next
out.
month, you'll know.
Okay.
And the only way that changes is if somebody says something at the public hearing and the board decides to modify the language.
Right.
But I think that the general consensus of the board is they would like to see some overflow parking, some attempt at overflow parking, a couple extra spaces and some such thing. And, I mean, you really don't have to design to minimums all the time. Put in some extras. But as Mark says, you know by December.
All right.
Well, right now, if they say that the regulations right now
Yeah.
apply, the parking spaces inside the garages do not count, and there's 2 spaces per unit required. That's what's right now.
Assigned or unassigned?
Well, I
It
don't
doesn't
know.
make any difference. It's
I don't know, it
solid.
doesn't say
That's the
assigned or
part that's-
unassigned,
That's the
so
part that's not
that's the
clear.
Yeah.
part that's not
Right.
clear. So that's what they're wrestling with, and that's what will probably change.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what the current regulations say.
We can come to agreement.
The board's modified that last time.
Yeah, that was the first time we got into
Right.
limited common parking. I don't believe any other condo association has that, do they? Limited common,
They just have common. Or does High Country?
Limited to the unit and
Park Pyramid, High Country, do they limit who can park in front of the garage?
I honestly don't know.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
any other privileges afloat? Okay, we're gonna jump to new business, the skateboard park annual review. I just received a letter from the mountain, writing the letter. Each year, we spend a considerable time and money and attention making repairs and additions needed to improve and ensure park safety. We also paint and work on the aesthetics of the park and surrounding areas. We ask that the park be left open for guests to use as weather permits. Once the snowfall, we will do a final end of season cleanup and secure any loose ends at the park. In May and June 2015, we will begin repairs to existing features and construction of new features in preparation for the skate park season. Pretty much the same letter we got last year. Any questions?
And I don't see any issues this year that
With no questions, I hear a motion to extend their use of the park through
I make a
another
motion to
year.
extend the use of the park as it has been for another year.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Can that include the date of October 31st?
October 30th.
The motion, just to have a
Yeah.
date rather than just 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, 31st.
Have a good day.
Lot line adjustment, Waterville Company, and 7 Clearwater Lane. Who's gonna present?
Oh, me?
I don't
That's
know.
me.
You must be 7 Clearwater Lane.
Well, no, that's Bill's property over there, the contractor storage yard, but it involves the town. So there are actually two requests as part of this. First thing that we would need to do would be to combine the old gas station lot with town hall. Well, I got some coloring because I know that Ray likes coloring.
Good job.
So here on my smaller map, I have colored, it's a lot line adjustment. The current lot is the pink outline here and juts out across the access to the bottom back of the sewer treatment. Yes, that's this little triangle here. So what Bill has proposed, talked to the selectmen about, is going to the green line, which would make it more of a rectangle trapezoid, okay? And so the resulting blue area here is the land that the Waterville Company would be giving the town. And the yellow highlighted area would be the area that the town would be giving back to the Waterville Company. The advantage to this is that we actually own the driveway into the back of the sewer treatment plant and around back down to the river. And we have leveled off or evened off the boundary line along Clearwater Lane. Okay, so that ownership is right up to the pavement edge, the green.
So you're drawing a straight line from that?
Straight line
to-
from there to there.
to that
Yeah,
line? Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
okay.
Can you see that map?
Yeah.
Mark, who owns all this property?
That's all town
Town
property. I
property.
need to talk about that for a second.
Okay, because I'm thinking, what is the giving back of those small slivers back to the Waterville Company do for Waterville Company?
Extend setback areas makes more of this
For you.
area, no, for
For them?
for the town, for
Okay,
Waterville.
oh, for them, okay, gotcha.
So basically,
And we don't use this area anymore because these dumpsters have been moved over here,
This is,
right? So this area used to be the single-family home dumpster enclosure.
yeah.
So drawing this line here is not an issue.
That's the green
We already
belt
were
and
on
cross-country
Waterville Company
trail.
land with it,
So it's an
and these dumpsters have been moved over here.
Where it is there.
Yeah, where the dumpster enclosure is right now is already Waterville Company land, so there's no loss. Yeah, no.
Out
Over
back.
where it used to be out back
Okay,
of
okay,
the sewer treatment.
gotcha.
Just curious, is this wetland line actually right on that easement line?
No,
No, it
wetland
goes
line
over.
comes down
It's
here.
right there.
Oh, okay, I see.
And this area here, I didn't color on my colorized map, but this area here will become an easement area, a greenbelt easement area. We're working on the language for that right now. Basically, the town will have easement rights to that land, which is basically everything except ownership of the land.
and
And
there's
it's-
the trail here.
That's where the trail is.
Yeah.
And it's already in the shoreline protection area, so there isn't a lot that can go on that parcel anyway. Or not a parcel, an easement area.
I remember.
Okay, now, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to do the combination of the town lot here with the gas station lot, because the way the lot lines come together, it's difficult to see on this map, but on that, see how this point right here, how it comes out and it touches the end of the triangle? Yeah, now,
Well, here's the
Where is
town
it?
hall. Here's town hall.
yeah, right here.
Yeah,
This,
that's what I thought.
this point right here in the triangle, if we straighten it off, we're gonna have a dangling boundary line. Does everybody get what I'm talking about?
Down here.
Yeah, right here at the end of the triangle. The lot line for this lot here comes down and hits right here. So we need to take that lot line between these two lots out first. So the agenda will have the lot line adjustment, and I have the lot combination and this on the application. In the subdivision regulations, we have to notice it, but it's up to the board whether or not you hold a public hearing on it. You don't have to, you can just discuss it and do it, because it's a minor lot line adjustment, does not create any new ownership.
There's only two abutters.
There's an abutter here,
Right.
the National
National
Forest,
Right.
but you also have Forest Knoll, and you have,
Oh, yeah.
The
it
old
goes
stone
all the
property.
way,
Oh, yeah.
the old stone property,
Yeah.
the,
Garages.
actually Village Condos is
Really?
in a butter by the distance.
Huh.
But the condo associations just get one letter to the board,
Right.
so. Do you think we need to go to those? Here's the
It's
map, it's
Yeah.
kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
So
once you
here's-
get into
Yeah, I
the
don't-
big-
I
This
don't
is
see
the
why we wouldn't.
butters map
Yeah.
for the town property. So we're gonna have Village Condos,
Yeah.
Forest Knoll,
garage.
Mountain View, or whatever it is,
Sun
and,
or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, all those.
all
Yeah.
those condo developments, and
Yeah.
Yeah, see it as anything's gonna.
The biggest cost is the notification, right? There's no extra cost to having a public hearing, right?
No, there's no cost to it. No?
I guess I would lean towards, with all these abutters, I'd lean towards a public hearing. I don't know how the rest of the board feel.
Well, public hearing, then you gotta notify the abutters, right?
You still gotta
Well,
notify.
you still have to
the
notify
abutters.
the
You have to
abutters.
notify
By the
all
regulation,
abutters.
it says you have to do notification, you just don't have to hold a public hearing.
Yeah. I don't know, that's, you know, I have no justification for that, it's just a gut feeling, to be polite, I mean,
Does it have to be a special time, or can it just be part of the?
No, it can be
part
part
of
of the
the,
regular.
part of the regular meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll,
that's fine.
we'll do whatever you guys wanna do. But
Well,
are there any concerns or anything you want? We will have the language of the easements done, by the next meeting, right? Please, we hope. We hope we will bring the easement language into you. But are there any other concerns or anything you would like to know from the selectmen?
Finish the tree line,
Finish the tree line?
well, cause this is all open here, right, and this is wooded down in here, isn't it? You got the tree line coming around, and I think this is all wooded, isn't it?
Oh, finish the tree line back
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Okay.
Cause, right, I think this is open, and this is wooded, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is wooded down to the river.
Okay. No, this looks like a straightforward one. I just think it be polite to the people who have a public hearing.
Yeah.
That
Well,
way
you're
we can't be-
Okay, but
notifying
no
them all.
other,
That
no
way
other
we can't be
concerns?
criticized.
Alright, and, if I could ask that the chair or somebody check the application that's, not right now, but, just
For
check and make
completeness.
sure that it's complete and that you don't want any additional information,
Okay.
okay? Alright,
We'll have,
get out of
we'll
your
have
way.
the vice chair and the secretary.
There you go.
What's this in our rules of procedure?
It is. Plan to meet.
I want to
Look at him smile.
Thank you. Nice job. Great job with the colors.
Much easier to see it.
Let's see, did the lot line adjustment, we did the skate park annual review.
We're like flying through the agenda.
Yeah,
I thought we'd be here till 9.
wetland study integration, let's go to old business, wetland integration study.
All right, so.
This is into the master plan.
Yeah.
Right. So, I gave each of you a sheet that just, covers the suggested wording, for the wetlands chapter. We were essentially going to use the first 7 pages of the study, which are an overview and introduction,
Great.
as the main language, but I just put in, this additional paragraph, prior to it, so I'd like you to just read it and see what you think and any suggestions.
Mark has one, you look over his shoulder. No, I can hear what they're talking about.
There are many, many references in the master plan, and I didn't list all the various references here, but throughout the plan, there are paragraphs and sentences instructing about how important the wetlands are.
Okay.
So,
See, what would be the chapter number of this? What's the next chapter? I couldn't find it.
No master.
Oh, it's 2 something.
I don't have the master plan with me right here. Looks like chapter 6 was conservation and preservation. 2.6.
What's the last chapter? That's the last chapter,
Yeah,
6?
that I have.
Mark,
Well, whatever the next chapter.
you didn't get this map down for everybody?
I can go run
Can you
it
do
off
that real quick?
if you-
When
yep.
was the last
thanks.
revised, 213?
Yes, 213.
Yeah, that's the one, okay, it's this one.
Is that the one you have, Wendy?
No.
No, 2011. Why am I always?
Yeah, I have.
Oh.
Do you have a copy of that, Bill?
So, if that's the last one. And,
Because I went online and I looked at the master plan and it had 2-something. This has all been, I guess we gotta figure out which is the latest master plan. Zoning ordinance.
oh, sorry. Hold on.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I saw.
Yeah, 2005, and then I've got that one. So
2011.
sorry, guys,
I have 2011.
Yeah, right.
that's the one we have,
2011.
it's me,
This one?
I goofed.
Is that the most current, right?
Yeah, this is confusing. Chapter 2, I think, the zoning is chapter 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The intent was to have a book with all the ordinances and regulations. And this was gonna be the second chapter in that master book. The zoning is 3, if you notice.
yeah,
Okay, so on,
I got it. Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
no, this is 6. Yeah, I guess 6. So it would be 2-7, okay.
Yeah, 2.6 is the end, last I had.
Yeah.
I got an older one, I'm looking at an older one in that draft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this would be, okay. Any comments on Aaron's proposal?
So 200.
Bill?
Yeah, I think I've read the wetlands study, and I think I've attended both the Conservation Commission hearing and the hearing here with the wetlands were, study was presented. And certainly in those studies, it said that one of the things that you could consider if you wanted to was a buffer along the wetlands. The other thing that I think that study showed was there's been no degradation of water quality in Waterville Valley because of any wetlands violations. The biggest concern that I think that study had said was there were undersized culverts in various places that were either problematic or causing problems. The fact that you're putting into the master plan that to protect the wetlands with a wetland ordinance, establishing a reasonable buffer. Right now we have no buffer, we've never had a buffer. And to maintain sufficient woodland buffer along the Mad, West Branch, and Snowsbrook rivers. All of those things sound really good, but I think you need to take a real hard look at what you want to do in addition to the current regulations that the state has that have always been followed, to my knowledge, and the Shoreland Protection Act, which also is very specific about that. My fear, being one who owns a lot of this land, is that if you start putting these buffers in where we've never had them before, with no demonstration that we need those buffers, you could have a serious impact on what the future development of the valley is, particularly, for example, along Corcoran's Pond, which is absolutely critical to the long-term future of Waterville Valley. So I personally think that putting in here that you're going to establish a buffer, or 2 different buffers, is dangerous wording.
Well, can I address that just briefly, Bill? This wording was taken from the master plan. It's already existing in the master plan.
Could you read that? I don't recall that.
2.6, it's right here
I-
on 2.56, right?
Well, the 2.6.17.1.
0.1. Yeah, it's the final bullet, right? Maintain sufficient woodland buffer along the Mad West by purpose. Yeah, it's that final bullet that's there. 2.6.17.1.
So, yeah, I didn't
Oh,
create that
it's,
language.
it's the final bullet that's there on page 2.57 of the master plan, under this section that's referenced, the 2.6.17.1.
And that's the exact wording?
That's the exact wording that exists in there. But I also wanted to address it because before we even get into the discussion of buffers, I mean, it's obviously a very contentious and important issue because it's of importance to the town as well as to you and as developers. I think as I looked at the plan, and this is the Conservation Commission, just a general consensus, I want to say we have not taken a vote yet, and we plan to do that at our next meeting. And as far as more details, but the general feeling is that most of the wetlands are on already developed properties, and there are only a couple of areas that are of concern. As you said, the floodwater storage, and the areas that are most important there would be the Mad River, Upper and Lower, and West Branch. And those areas are protected pretty much by the Shoreline Protection Act. So there's nothing that we can put in that would improve on that. So we're not concerned about that. And the only other two areas that seem of concern by their size is the siltation issue in Corcoran's Pond. And we talk about that Upper Snows Brook area where the culverts are undersized. That's the area where there's the most siltation that comes into Corcoran's Pond. And so improving the culverts definitely would be something that could be done there. But there's 1,600 acres, I believe the numbers were 1,600 acres of wetland drainage. Oh, that's okay, probably don't need it. 1,600 acres of wetland drainage that come down through 5.8 acres of identified wetland in there. So looking at some other towns and what they do, they've exempted, for example in Sandwich, they exempt any wetland under 15,000 square feet from their setback regulations. So an acre is like 43-something thousand square feet. So certainly, within those parameters, the Upper Snows Brook and even the Noon Peak, that little section between the athletic center and the school, is 1.5 acres, something like that, of wetland. So those certainly would fall within a category that we might consider putting a buffer zone in. So the commission is considering like a 25-foot buffer zone around the wetland in the Upper Snows Brook section. And that's the one that's directly across from Corcoran's Pond. And I think that could be up for discussion, but I think that's the most important thing as far as reducing siltation. That's the main reason there. Besides, it's a really big wetland. So that would be the way we're thinking right now, but certainly it's up to the planning board to discuss it and see what the board thinks is a reasonable setback, if any. I mean, it's up to the board to really discuss that. But just the point the Conservation Commission wants to make, I guess, is that we probably should do something where there's existing developed properties. It's not going to affect any existing structures. I can see a homeowner that perhaps might be impacted if they wanted to put a deck on or something of that nature. But other than that, I don't see too much to worry about. I mean, what are your feelings about?
Well, the My first question would be, if you create a wetlands buffer, and I go to the state and get a wetlands permit, which allows a certain level of disturbance of a wetlands for a culvert, for example. It's all properly engineered. How does your wetlands buffer impact my ability to get a wetlands permit to put in a driveway?
That's a good question.
And then the other thing is, I've traveled all of those cross-country trails that have the undersized culverts on them. You know, they come under the jurisdiction of the Forest Service in the ski area, and I think the wetland study was very good in identifying that as a primary source of that siltation, which I agree is a huge problem. I don't see creating a wetlands buffer as addressing that problem at all. You know, I only see it as a complication for somebody who owns a lot that has wetlands on it, who now all of a sudden 25 more feet of their land all along that wetlands is subject to a buffer, when we have no evidence that not having a buffer in Waterville Valley has ever been a problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, my concern is affecting people's property rights and ability to use that property in a way that does not degrade water quality in the valley. And I think collectively, we've all done a very good job of doing that. You know, the undersized culverts, you know, I think is something that everybody needs to address. But I'm not convinced that creating a buffer is going to solve the problem, and it might complicate the problem for a lot of other issues. I'm real concerned about the final development along Corcoran's Pond and the long-term ability to do that in a fashion that's going to enhance the valley and create the environment that we've all spent a lot of time talking about.
Right. Now, none of us are wetland scientists, so I'm just wondering, because what you say makes a lot of sense, if it would be worthwhile to have our wetland scientist, like, tell us what she thinks the benefit would be, or make some suggestions along that line, have her look into it, and say, well, I'm looking at this wetland, and frankly, I don't see any benefit, or a 10-foot setback would be sufficient, or whatever her opinion might be. Maybe we need to get a professional opinion on that. Who's really not qualified to make that kind of judgment.
Harry, I don't have the wording with me, but we read this paragraph a few times in our meeting, where disturbing a buffer zone has been proven to disturb the wetlands. That's why we have a buffer zone. It's like a demilitarized zone. You need a safety zone.
Yeah,
So
I'm just thinking.
we can't argue that we don't need a buffer zone. You can't say it's not important. And I think the culverts are a different topic altogether.
Yeah, I just think it would be, really important if we're going to make a regulation or a change to zoning, that we have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and really have a professional opinion supporting our position, because otherwise it's not defensible. So.
And the other point I wanted to make was, just because not having the buffer zone in the past, you're saying that we haven't disturbed any wetlands so far?
No, I've had wetlands
That doesn't mean it
permits.
won't affect the future.
Disturbance of wetlands doesn't necessarily impact water quality.
Disturbance of wetlands can affect many different things.
Oh, I agree,
So water quality isn't the only thing we're concerned about.
Right, it's not just water quality. I mean, really, the two main issues that, for me, and I'm not speaking for the commission, I'm just speaking for me now, are the floodwater storage. And that is pretty much taken care of by the Shoreline Protection Act, the main areas where the floodwater buildup, and the siltation into Corcoran's Pond. And so reducing that siltation ultimately is going to save the town a lot of money and a lot of aggravation. And I think that, and even with development will be improved if that can be protected. So you don't want to put a driveway in someplace and then have that extra water runoff and, taking more topsoil off because it's not shrubbed anymore. It's,
One of the things that I suggest is, just like with SE Group, you're getting some practical, or you, at one point you were looking for practical solutions for them on grant monies or how to actually implement some of the things you want to do. I think one of the big questions is, how do you get the Forest Service in the ski area to go change all their culverts?
it's a
Okay?
good que- yeah.
Therein lies the most immediate problem, I think.
The siltation.
Along with runoff off town roads,
Right.
which I also think is
Yeah.
a huge problem that's largely unaddressed.
Mhm.
And to go put the burden, if you're looking at what needs to do, on the private landowner, I think is extremely unfair. The town should lead the way in flood storage, siltation control around roads, and figuring out how to fix these culverts. And possibly your wetlands consultant, who's very good, who works on all this stuff, can say, here's the process for getting the Forest Service in the ski area to address their issues. Here are grant monies and issues to work on planning for town runoff issues.
Right. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense because, certainly I would like to see it done the right way. So, Mark, is that something we can do for the next Conservation Commission, maybe, is get Cindy to address this?
If you guys ask her to come in, sure. I would prefer that we take a phased approach to it. You need to adopt the wetlands study as part of the master plan. That's gonna be your guiding document. As far as the zoning ordinance changes, adopting the map as part of the zoning map so that you know where the wetlands are and what property you're potentially impacting. Because, if you're gonna put a buffer in and you don't know where these wetlands actually are on the tax maps, you're not gonna know what properties you're impacting and how much you're impacting. I guess those would be the first steps. As far as the buffer is concerned and the actual, what is actually impacting siltation, where is it impacting? I don't think that's something we're gonna solve in a matter of a couple of weeks.
Well, I would agree with that
This-
for sure.
I think adopting the wetlands map itself, state law controls, there is a reason that the state law does not have a buffer in it. So let's look at that. Adopt the map first. Once you have the wetlands delineated, the state law is there to protect those wetlands. Okay? If we want to take an additional step because of X, Y, and Z that we find over the next year or whatever, then you can propose language in the zoning ordinance to adopt a buffer. Right?
Right.
That's always a possibility. But I think it's going to get convoluted if we try to do everything at once. If you try to adopt the map and the buffer and write regulations between now and when you have to have your public hearing, we're not gonna have a good job. And I don't think we're gonna be able to build a consensus one way or the other. And so it's gonna be a whole lot of effort that's just gonna be defeated because we're not going to have a reason for it. Oh, we feel like there should be a 25-foot buffer. We don't know what the impact is, we don't know where the impact is, we don't know why, but we want a buffer. That's not a good reason to do it. Now, if we find working with Cindy that there is a reason to do it and we have some information or we need to tell the Forest Service and the ski area that they need to upsize those culverts. I mean, look at what happened in the 2 storms this week. Did you look at Corcoran's Pond? It was impacted by those 2 small rainstorms. And that's not because of anything with the wetlands here in town, it's because of what's happening upstream. And Cindy told us that.
She told us that, exactly.
So, those areas,
Well,
that's
she
where we're
also
gonna
said there was
save
help,
money.
she also said there was grant money available.
That's right, and we can find that, and maybe that's what we need to focus on for 2015, if we can build that into the budget.
Well, I would think
Okay.
that's an important thing to do. I mean, but also, I think we should start by having this discussion with her at the next Conservation
And-
Committee
and
meeting.
David can invite her
And let's see where she takes it.
go for it. Absolutely, I have no problem doing that, I just don't wanna rush language into the zoning ordinance.
Well, I don't think we do
And
either.
adopt anything
I don't think we do either.
above.
We just want to get it moving
Yeah,
forward.
absolutely, I have no problem with that, but I would caution you to not try to
Well,
do everything at once. I think we have enough on our plate right now between signs and
yeah, well,
parking and
today,
roads and everything else that we're gonna be talking about here in a little while.
today all we're trying to do is, and it's already been done, it's been accepted and voted on to accept, to put it in the master plan.
Right.
And we just, all we're talking about is the
Question was how to put
language
it
that
in.
we're gonna put it in. So, I mean, it's already been approved last month.
That's right.
So, you know, I guess the key question is this language sufficient? Do we wanna make any changes to this language? Is this what we wanna put in the master plan? Thank you, Mary, for putting out this,
And is the full document really there on the website?
Not yet.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's not there yet. No, I checked last night.
Up the street, in the forest.
Yeah, well,
Yes. And she's been identified specific Yeah.
I don't need,
Sir?
I don't need any motion to this either, because it's already been approved. right?
Well, I think if you're, because that really changes the first 7 pages. That is the actual language that's gonna go into the report. Yes, the report itself, the whole thing, the book, was adopted,
Yes.
agreed to be part of the master plan.
Right.
Yeah.
But you didn't agree on
On the language.
how to do it.
Okay.
You talked about the first 7 pages, but then you talked about this addition.
right,
So this is the physical change in the master plan.
right.
So I think you should have a motion
Okay.
if that language is okay.
We talked about the first 7 pages being in the master plan and the
The rest of the
entirety
book,
be,
just to be available.
right,
Mhm.
And that's what this would be.
right.
That's right.
So do I have a motion to move this forward?
Well, I'll move that we
Okay.
adopt this language.
Have a second?
Well, can I ask, is this tautological? I mean, is this the language that's going in the master plan saying the master plan instructs the town to do something?
It does.
Yes.
No, but are we saying in the master plan instructs the town? In other words, are you actually, is this the actual?
Yes, that's the actual
So isn't that
language.
Yes.
kinda tautological, or isn't that weird?
In an effort
That's like talking
to
in the-
apply, or in an effort to
Third person.
comply with other parts of the plan, or something like that, because I think what Harry's referring to, he said that there are references to wetlands in several other sections of the master plan. So maybe
Several
that should
sections?
say,
There are quite a few, at least a half a dozen sections where it's referred to.
Oh, half a dozen, okay.
Yeah.
So I just turned to a page where I
Yeah.
saw one
Yeah.
reference, but there's 6.
Yeah, there are quite a few.
But is your main point to take out the Waterville Valley Master Plan and say as referenced earlier in the master plan?
Or you could say
Yeah, 'cause it's-
as referenced in
It's
the
just
master.
weird and
Yeah.
bad writing.
as referenced in this plan,
Yeah,
Yeah,
in other areas of this plan, or something like that, other sections of this plan.
yeah, because it sounds,
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought that this was
Yeah.
something for us, but if this is in the plan, then we should just say, you know, is referenced in the plan, in this plan.
So what
So
words are you changing?
how would you state it then?
Well, now that I'm thinking about it carefully.
Instead of instruct, states? How about just,
Well, it's just odd to have it say that the master plan, when you're in the master plan. So it's more
so,
taking that part out, I guess, or just saying, you know, is referenced in section 2617(1). We will, I don't know,
the town will,
yeah.
as referenced
something like that.
in, so as
You know what I
referenced
mean.
in 2617(1), the town will protect wetlands,
Or,
and that,
or
you know.
it's still a little weird, because the way we have it in the master plan, like, you know, at least the version I'm reading, you know, just says, there's a bullet that says protect wetlands as kind of a goal. So it's, when we're saying it like this, it makes it seem more, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to the way it actually is in the master plan. So I don't know. It makes me less comfortable.
Mm.
You see what I mean? Like here, it's just saying, here's a goal. A goal is to protect the wetlands with an ordinance establishing reasonable buffers. I don't know. Maybe it is what it is.
Or maybe instead of reiterating the whole quote, since it's already in the master plan, if we reference that section, would that make it seem less,
Yeah.
whatever,
So omit
aggressive?
the quote itself.
Since it's
As
there,
referencing,
Yeah, I mean,
just
it's-
reference a section of the master plan instead? Is that what you're saying?
I guess is referenced in the section on buffer zones, you know, in parentheses 2617(1).
Okay.
Yeah, the
Uh.
difficulty is 2.6.17 is titled short-term animal and wetlands protection plans. Oh, and 2.6.18, maybe reference to both sections overall.
Okay.
Since, I mean, it literally would be the page before, turn back one page and add it there.
What's the other section?
2.6.18 and 2.6.17, for the short-term animal and wetlands protection, and long-term animal wetlands.
Could I just recommend not referring to specific sections because they
Renumbered.
change? And
Oh.
then you've gotta go back and hunt through all of these.
Okay.
So,
Good point.
say several sections or other sections of,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
reference wetlands, or just keep it generic, because
Okay.
we're gonna have to hunt through the whole master plan if we're,
Yeah.
and you don't wanna miss one either.
Right.
Would be as referenced in
How about the
in
master
several areas of the
plan?
master plan.
How about the master plan addresses wetland protection plans? Well, I don't know.
Well, not to put you on the spot, would you want to write something and email it to the group, or do we have to have a decision today?
I don't know.
No,
do
I
we?
don't think we need it.
We don't need it today, so this is just, we can work on this then.
Okay, we can work on
Yeah, I mean, you're already in the master plan, so
Yeah.
you don't have to say the master plan. That's
True.
what I'm saying. It's
Right.
just odd.
That's
when
Yeah,
you-
interesting.
we'll
when
come
you
up
put
with the
yourself in
language.
Yeah,
the
okay.
I'll,
process of reading
We'll
it.
table
and see
it
what I
till
mean.
Okay.
next meeting.
yeah.
Okay. We got
Okay,
sufficient comments on it, I guess.
yeah,
Okay. Again, thank you, Harry, for
you're welcome.
bringing it forward. To the, let's see, we did that. Let's skip to the update for the pedestrian village study.
Yeah.
Pretty close to good timing.
Yeah, huh?
Oh, that's pretty good. I'm gonna give me a second. I'm gonna set up a PowerPoint projector. If
Okay.
that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Tom was kind enough to find ours.
Nancy, this is the list of references in the master.
Grab a laptop.
I'd like to get out of here too. Maggie's history, but
You'll be tired, but you'll
temps like 87, 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Harry, you wanna move over? Yeah. You can see better.
Did everybody see that all right? A little sluggish this morning.
Sorry, Ray. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what one you're going for.
Better,
It's a
worse?
different one.
Come on.
Alright.
There we go.
For some reason, it says to say processing a lot. Not sure exactly what it's doing. Processing. Yeah. So, good morning.
Morning.
I'm joined today by Nick Sanders from VHB. The agenda for today, I'll sort of pull this up, is to do, primarily do sort of a status review where we're at. I've got some new information to share with you relative to the second community survey that was completed, so I want to go through that. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the projects and policies that have kind of sugared out of the analysis process. So we've identified a series of specific projects and or policy areas that we're going to provide recommendations to the town within. And I want to walk through what those are so you have an understanding of that. I also want to talk to you a little bit about how we're going to approach them, because I think it's important to get everybody on the same page in terms of when you see this document, you know, how it's going to present that information and sort of clarify that. So just to sort of where we're at, we've completed the second survey. We had 254 responses, which is actually not bad considering it was a narrower time span. If you remember, the other one went on for approximately 4 weeks or so. This one we kept about 2 weeks, which was adequate. I think, again, you'll see as I go through the information, it gives us what we really need, and that is a snapshot of some community input. That's really what their purpose is. It's not meant to be a statistically valid survey that categorically says this is the answer, this is the answer. It really is to help us gauge and take a pulse of what people think. VHB and SE Group have been working on a series of elements, and I'll talk about those relative to the key themes that have emerged from the projects thus far. and I'll go through each one of those in turn today. And we're in the phase of this project, as you may recall, when we started this process with you guys, there was 5 phases identified. There was an initial project initiation, data gathering phase, an analysis phase, issues and opportunities phase, which we're in right now, and then there's a draft and final plan. The issues and opportunities phase is the bulk of a lot of the effort in terms of getting ideas together in a form that you guys can benefit from that suggest where you should go in terms of all these different facets of the study. Our goal is to prepare an internal draft. It's an internal draft between SE Group and VHB by the end of this month, so we can coordinate our collective work on it and review it internally, and then get it to you guys within the first couple weeks of November, so mid-November. So you'll have the first draft of this document in mid-November. We would then do a public meeting in sometime in December. Given the season and stuff, it actually would probably function very well après-ski, quite frankly, to kind of maximize the opportunity for people to come. And I'm not just talking about local residents, but people who may be up here for a weekend. So a Friday evening, a Friday late afternoon might be a really good time to do it. We'll obviously coordinate with you to finalize what the time frame for that would be. And then obviously based on input you guys may provide with us, and obviously input we'll get from the town in general, population in general, we'll work to finalize this document in January, as early as we can in January, end of January, no later than the end of January, which is all very consistent with the original scope that we'd outlined. I don't think we're shifting it all at this point. So today's agenda obviously shares some of the results from the second community survey, and then review those themes and the issues and opportunity elements that we're exploring and how we're going to communicate this to you guys. So we did the second community survey, in 254 responses. We asked a lot of similar questions from last time just to kind of understand who people were, who responded to it. Do you own or rent? 11%. In this case, there was much more ownership response than previously. Previously, there was about 25% rental, 75% ownership roughly. This was about 89% ownership, 11% rental. And that probably comes from the fact that the survey went out around the time when people were going back to school and kids were, so it was harder to get responses, I'm sure. But at the same time, it just sort of shows what we got for responses. Year-round resident, 19% yes and 81% no, which is really consistent with last time. We had a lot of non-year-round residents, obviously. Interestingly, we had 58% said they had responded to the previous survey, but 42% said they hadn't done the previous survey. So we actually caught new people in this survey, which is actually good. We got some different perspectives. And then age distribution, most everybody was older than 35. Which is not safe. So we asked some questions related to the use of sidewalk. Basic question: do you find the sidewalks difficult? Are they hard to navigate? Are there issues related to use of sidewalks that you think make it difficult to use? Clearing in the winter and all that sort of stuff. And generally speaking, most respondents said they did not have a problem using the sidewalks. They felt they were good. But where people did find suggestions for improving the sidewalks, this ranks them in terms of the responses. And clearer sidewalks in the winter. So the clearing of sidewalks, the maintenance of sidewalks in the wintertime was obviously more highly ranked than other categories. Better lighting along the pathways. People felt, again, that was one of the higher criteria for improvement of sidewalk conditions. Wider sidewalks, a little bit less. Signage, a little bit less. Having the bus be accessible from the sidewalks, i.e., you can get on and off the bus more easily. Less important ramps, handrails, kind of down the line. So, interestingly, these dovetail very well with what we had heard previously from stakeholder interviews and some of the other public engagement process. But it also points to the fact that, from my perspective, that some of the improvements can be relatively, are going to be more operations and maintenance oriented, which is not surprising. I mean, it's going to be a balance of new things perhaps, and then keeping your current conditions at a minimum level so people feel like they're getting the benefit of them. We asked a series of questions related to potential improvements. One of them was a sidewalk in Tecumseh. And we asked this question in a way that allowed people to answer no, they don't want to have a sidewalk on Tecumseh, or yes, but they could qualify that response with some qualifiers, like maybe, but it depends on what it's designed to, or maybe depending on the cost, or in some cases just outright yes. And we find that useful in a survey question because it gives somebody an out from saying yes categorically. They can say maybe, or yes, but I'm concerned about cost. And that was how the questions were asked. So we asked the question on Tecumseh, and 14% said no, 46% said yes, which is actually surprised me somewhat, given our analysis of Tecumseh's need for a sidewalk, which we are not 100% clear that there actually is a pressing need for a sidewalk on Tecumseh from in the engineering and analysis perspective, but apparently the respondents felt strongly that there was a need. And then still a 40% responded said, yeah, it depends on how it's designed, depending on what the cost of it comes in, how it costs us. So that was an interesting takeaway that will obviously factor into our thinking. The other part of this was the two other questions similar were improvements to crosswalks. That was an element that we talked about in the survey, asking people, would you like to see crosswalks have a little bit more definition to them, like, maybe signage that says crosswalk, and maybe signals that is necessary, or anything like that that helps to promote the visibility of crosswalks. And again, we had 33% said no, but a large majority of people said yes, but depends on specifics, more specifics. Is it cost? How much does it cost? What does it look like? Maybe, but only where important was another response that 19% of the respondents chose, and which is interesting. So again, there's some clarification or clarification of the yes responses around prove it to me that it's needed, or demonstrate that it's cost effective, or demonstrate that where you're proposing it is the right location. That's kind of what I took from that. Another aspect in the survey that we asked, and this dovetails to some of the issues that we're tracking, is can we do things along Snows Brook to improve the quality of those trails? So as you all know, the trail heading down from the conference center is rustic to say the least, and there's no bridge anymore that crosses there, and the trails along the brook are nice, but there's probably some room for improvement. And we offered that up as a suggestion. Would you like to see improvements like that along those trails? And again, the respondents there was I don't have the number there. Must have forgot to copy it over, but a significant number said yes, approximately about 26%. And then the remainder said, yeah, but I'm concerned about the design. I'm concerned about the costs. And then we also asked the question, were you concerned about losing character of the area, the rural, rustic character of the trails? Because we understand that is an important value that a lot of people ascribe to the trail system. Again, what this tells us is, in general, from the survey data, that there is some benefit to exploring this as an option, because there's some room within this response, we believe, to explore some opportunities and sort of get public opinion about them in more specific detail. So it doesn't give you carte blanche to do anything you want by any stretch, but it does sort of evoke the fact that people feel like there could be things that are done along those trails to improve their value to the community. We asked a lot about parking, a few questions about parking, really important questions about parking, and the premise is that, again, our recommendations will deal with parking, because it's obviously an important component of your future redevelopment, renovation, etc. We wanted to understand or gauge whether or not people were interested in the town actually providing parking, municipally controlled parking in some ilk. And we asked that question. Now, again, there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of no's. The 32% no, didn't want to have municipal parking under any circumstance. Again, there was a fairly good size that said yes, but there was a lot of people who were concerned about the cost of that, which is fair, and a lot of people concerned about location. So where does this public parking exist, and how much does it cost the public? Fair questions. we also asked the question. I didn't put the graph on here because this actually wasn't that visually compelling. Would you pay for parking? And I guess you could probably answer that question. No one wants to pay for parking, which is not. You had to ask it, but I can tell you, I knew the answer before we even sent out the survey. It was 89% no and 11% yes, I believe. So what that tells us, again, is that that does not mean that a recommendation from us won't include something like figuring out how to pay for parking. I can tell you that, because that is something we are obligated to do in terms of our work, is to give you guys the benefit of how it might work to your advantage, for the community's advantage, and also how other communities have dealt with the situation. But at the same time, it does suggest to me and us that there's a barrier that you have to kind of overcome. Yeah, there's a mental barrier and a physical barrier of if we're gonna invest in public parking, whatever form that might take, getting the public convinced that there's value and benefit to it is going to be a very important aspect of it. You got to demonstrate that there's actually not just a need, because I think people recognize there is a need at times for parking, but that it's got value to the community in a broader context, and that'll be an interesting and very important part of the work that we're doing. Now, this is the question you responded to in terms of the survey. We did ask the question about the bringing a civic presence within the core of the town, and the way the question was worded, we broadened that out a little bit to include not just a meeting house, but sort of a civic component of it. There was a basically 50-50 split, roughly. And I think partly due to the way the question was phrased, so I think we want to continue to explore this as we move along. But I think there was definitely some concerns about where it is and what it is, and the design of it, the cost of it, all that component combines in here. So it gives us not pause per se, but just helps us clarify or sort of think about this maybe a little bit differently, to make sure that if we're going to suggest, or if we believe is a good strategy for the community to consider, to have some civic component to whatever happens in the future, so that the center of town actually has a civic function, making sure that that's defined adequately and potentially clarified, so that people know it's not simply just trying to recreate the town center there, but it's basically to make sure that the public feels they can utilize that environment in some meaningful way. That's kind of where we're taking from that. We asked, I really like this question. We asked a lot of sort of a ranking question about the things that people felt were really important to consider as the core develops. It's a whole laundry list of different factors or considerations that we wanted to get people's opinions about, all the way from providing public open space, agreeing to expanding the tax base, as important factors that the community should consider as the town core evolves and grows and does its thing. And interestingly enough, a lot of these have, if you look at the top few, providing a public green open space was, again, the longer the bar, the more respondents chose that as a major factor. The higher they ranked it as a factor that the town should consider. So 4.06 or so. Maintaining trail connectivity within the town core was a big concern for people. They didn't want to see the town core sort of preclude the ability for people to go outside of the town to get to the national forest. Maintaining parking, preserving views of the mountain was another one that was really strongly felt that by people. So I'm not going to read them all off, but these were really helpful. These are going to be really helpful for us in terms of policy language and discussion about what happens in the core as attributes that need to be considered as any particular plan comes forward, I think. They seem to be, and again, I'm not terribly surprised by some of the respondents. I mean, preservation of views is an obvious one. I would have guessed that would be on the list or would have ranked pretty highly. But it was interesting to see where some people came down on it. We did ask the question, connecting to the mountain via bus transit. Again, that ranked fairly high in terms of people's desire for that element to be part of what happens in the core. A gondola connection was slightly less of importance. Again, these are all elements, I think, all of these elements should be considered in some ways, by virtue of any sort of development process. But it just gives a snapshot of some of the main points of concern or interest in the respondents to the survey. We also asked a series of questions related to the brand and identity piece, and we talked about that at the community picnic. For those of you who are there, probably one of the big takeaways of this study is going to be, it has been, and will certainly be in the final report, I would assume, is going to be a fairly important element of your community building is to be aligned as a community with a brand, and actually figuring it out, what is the Waterville Valley brand, not just the town's brand, but the mountain's brand and the Waterville Company's brand and the lodge's brand, and so how you all can come together with some clarification about what you guys are, so that as you try to attract people here for whatever reason, they actually know that, they actually can understand that. So we asked had a series of words that we asked people to rank in terms of highest priority relative to the brand, most relevant to the brand, down to the least relevant from their perspectives. And the words ranged from wild to family oriented. So, covered the gamut. And obviously family oriented was huge. It was the number one response from everybody, from not everybody, but from the majority of people. It was highly ranked by the respondents. Family oriented, natural, peaceful, safe. Those are all words that we think really penetrate deeply with the psyche of the community. And I can tell you, even though, again, the response rate was, less than the previous one, we heard a lot of these same words reflected in comments in the previous survey, as well as in public meetings and in stakeholder discussions. So it's really pointing to from my perspective, it's pointing to some strong evidence that those are words that really are critical to think about as a brand identity is established. Funded pretty well too, which is good. We also asked people to rank the things, the elements in the community that are also really important parts of the brand identity. So, things to do, what the components of the community are and how they might be reflected externally. So skiing, obviously not a huge surprise. I mean, that's obviously I would have expected that to be highly ranked. The White Mountain National Forest was also really highly ranked in terms of people's response, which is interesting. Hiking came in number 3. I would never have guessed that hiking would have been that high up in the respondents I know it's been a big part of a conversation we've had, but I was really surprised by it reaching basically the level it did in terms of the responses. Nordic skiing, biking, and then down from there. Then it goes to town square, family retreats, tennis, events, lodging, the pond, BBTS, hockey, So even though we know from the last survey, when we asked people the last survey why did they come here, BBTS was always a huge draw. I mean, that's obviously a huge magnet for people actually to come to this place. It's not actually what they think is the most important thing to sell. It may get people here, but this is what you externalize your message towards. And interestingly, those top 5 are all active recreation oriented. So, which really is an interesting, reality here. So, what the response to the survey felt was the most important consideration for its the external brand identity were active recreational oriented elements. So, we'll hopefully digest that a little bit and give you guys some thoughts as we move along here. So, we have this is always going to be a tricky one. We had identified at the community picnic a series of opportunities that we wanted to explore, and we're in the middle of exploring those. And I'll just sort of walk through a little bit of them. And sorry, I apologize for the graphic. This projector is not living up to its expectations. But one of the things we want to do is create a sense of arrival in the community. And I think as you approach town, you have the BBT welcome to home of freestyle skiing sign, and then you get to the cluster of signs right at the intersection of Triple I Road and Valley Road that has the Water Valley and has all the sort of directional pieces of it. And our understanding, our recommendation will be to figure out some structure to a signage program that actually is a little bit more inclusive in its welcome. So it's not just welcome to the mountain, it's not just welcome to the town, there's a better integration of that so that you really feel like you've arrived at the place before you get to the fork in the road. Really to help to establish the fact that you're coming into a community. Yes, you go left to go to the mountain, but you go straight to go to the town. And it's really important to sort of communicate that in a more visible way. Recognizing that, yeah, if you live here, you know where you're going. But if you're coming here for the first time, that's something you need to work on. There's a series of, there's a strategy we're looking at in terms of creating a looped on-the-road bike lane. And the idea that we're studying is that right now you guys have a fairly generous road width for the most part, particularly on Valley Road as it goes around. And there's enough room on that road, it appears, to be able to put in a striped or sort of demarcated bike lane that's share the road oriented. But that would have to accompany, what would have to accompany that would be signage and appropriate signage and appropriate features to make people know that is the case. That this is a bike lane that the community has established and that is valuable as a community resource. The idea being is that when you actually arrive into town, some of those, remember those value attributes we saw, family-oriented, safe, those sort of things, become visibly expressed in the appearance of the community. Vis-a-vis, you see a bike lane, and you actually can see that it's actually inviting you to be on it. You see signage that actually supports the notion of this is a pedestrian-friendly community, and we want people to actually park their cars and not get in them again if they can avoid it. Or if they need to go anywhere, they take the shuttle that's running around. So part of the issues and opportunities we're exploring is things around promoting that sensibility. So the bike lane is one of them. A series of crosswalk improvements. Again, we'll have a variety of different potential treatments for those crosswalks depending on the circumstance. But we've looked at the data we collected from the January traffic study that VHB helped coordinate, which also included monitoring of pedestrian crossings. And granted, it's middle of winter and you're going to get less of it, but we did actually have some locations, even in wintertime, which had a significant number of crossings relative to what we would expect to see. So there are several crossing areas that we believe could be improved, and also to help reinforce that brand identity of it's a safe environment. The overarching recommendation, one of the overarching recommendations is going to be, you guys have a unique opportunity to really sell the brand proposition that this is a safe place to be. That this is a community. You can come here, come off the highway, go 9 miles or 10 miles off the highway, get to a place where you can literally park your car and walk around, bike around, do whatever you want, and feel safe doing it. And it's not just idle talk either. It's real. The roadway network you guys have, and the volume of traffic you're dealing with, and the speed of the traffic you're dealing with allows for lots of opportunities to utilize your public spaces more effectively for pedestrian-oriented uses. And I think that's one of the things we're going to bring a lot to that conversation in the report as we're putting it together. We talked a little bit about the Snows Brook Trail area, and a couple of the things we're studying on that is whether or not there is what we can do to enhance the connectivity down to it from the conference center, which I think is a big deal. Another area that I need to coordinate with Mark on is going to be, is there a possibility of getting another connection from Tecumseh down to Snows Brook? So that, and obviously we'd have to work with the private landowners to do that because there's no public easement across those property. But there would seem to be some value to exploring a connection from the parking lots of the conference center, the sort of the edge of the parking lots of the conference center, down to Snows Brook, basically where the dam crosses over. And again, that would allow for people to have an alternative route that is functional, attractive, and perhaps more rustic, that, sort of not down on a sidewalk route, but also would let people kind of get back down, get to the core of your community, the hub of your community in a more effective and more interesting way. So we're looking at that. We're going to be talking with you guys about what that might look like. There is parking. We're looking at a couple of things. We're looking at parking in the core, and we are studying two parts of that. One is how much parking you guys really need versus what you are currently requiring. There's three parts of that. How much parking you need versus what you're really requiring. Our recommendation is swinging towards pushing you downward in your requirements for parking in general, because the industry standards and what we've seen in lots of other mountain communities, you guys are over parking in some cases. The other part of that is exploring some idea for municipal parking and what that might look like, recognizing that you have quasi-public parking now essentially with the town square. I mean, even though it's all on private land, it does serve a public function. I mean, that parking is vital to the community to make sure people who come here can actually find a place to park, to go shop and eat and do all those other things. Mm-hmm. So our premise is that the community has some obligation, some interest in making sure that that parking in the future, whatever happens, is still there, clearly, and is adequate to serve the needs that you have, and also is convenient so that people feel like they can use it in an effective way. So there's going to be some discussions around that. And then the third aspect of the parking question is recognizing those two realities, is that there's going to be a public-private component to parking down the road in our estimation. It's kind of where almost every mountain resort community has gotten to at some point. Some interaction between the public and the private sector to make sure parking is sufficient to serve the enterprise, the overall objective. And in that context, communities have approached that relationship in a number of different ways, and one of them is they've either incentivized the private sector to reduce local parking demand by virtue of contributing to transit, for example. So like employee management in some cases, like can you park your employees in Plymouth and shuttle them in? Can you coordinate your schedules so that they're more organized, so we don't have to we can know how much employee stock is taking up parking, and where can we put those into places that are less desirable, or can we manage them more effectively? So there's areas of policy that have been developed around a lot of mountain communities that have carrots for developers to reduce their parking demand if they do some other things. And those other things contribute to sort of lowering the overall ambient need for parking. Encouraging people to stay in, to not use their cars and keep their cars keep their cars parked while they're in town. Valet is another one. Valet parking allows for a hotel or a hotel operation, for example, to be very efficient with parking. They can put those cars tighter, and they can organize them in a way that is effective, allowing people to still get access to them when they need them, but it's not a parking lot that is sort of free-form and open-ended, and people park 10 feet apart, and it's very inefficient. So we'll be bringing some of those to the conversation as well. We are still going to carry and still discuss the gondola, and we actually we've got some very recent and relevant information on the gondola connection, gondola connections in general in mountain communities that we think will be of value to you to think about. This is obviously an important, potentially long-term opportunity that needs to be, we believe, should be continued to be a part of the thinking. The triggers for it, however, those will need to be really carefully thought out. So what actually gets to the point where you actually trigger the gondola connection will have to be a very important consideration, because in lots of ways the transit hub, which is again we're going to propose something happening in the core as the transit hub functions in a lot of ways as the same linkage, albeit in a different form. So on the transit side of the equation, we're studying several improvements. One is consolidation of the bus stops themselves, and the improvement of those bus stops so they actually appear as bus stops. Because right now there's not a lot of clarity if you drop somebody in here who's never been in town before and tell them to find the bus stops, they would have a hard time doing that. And so the idea is to create perhaps 6 or maybe 7 defined bus stops in town that are in places that make the most sense from our perspective, that have a visual identity that's consistent with whatever brand you kind of can come up with, but also reinforce the schedule. That they have the map that has the schedule on it. You know when the bus is going to be there, depending on the day of the week. They have a place to sit down. They have a place to lean your skis up against, so that you're not sort of having to sit out there in the muck waiting for it. And that they all serve as kind of aggregation points for where people can feel more comfortable walking down from wherever they're staying to those aggregation points. That's one thing we're working on. The second thing we're working on is this again peak time strategy, because you guys actually have peak transit needs and then you've got everything else. So peak transit needs, it might be a dual, call it a red bus blue bus schedule. And a red bus blue bus schedule is one where there is a red bus, which is an express, basically that only hits those 6 stops or whatever the number is, bus stops, and goes up the mountain and back. That's all it does. And if you want to get on that bus, you've got to be at one of those 6 stops. The blue bus stops more at the lodges. Stops more, has a little bit slow. It's going to have a lot slower time, but it's more convenient if you have a family and you're going to be staying at Black Bear and you just want to, get home and you don't want to have to wait and walk. That's going to hit more stops. So some communities have used that sort of red bus, blue bus approach, and actually can work really well. On non-peak seasons, it can be a little bit more flexible, but you got to have a peak season transit strategy that actually is rock solid, and people can count on it, because we've seen from the previous survey, stakeholder discussions, public input, the buses suck. You might strike that, but they do. They really do. They really are. They are not functioning well relative to people's expectations, and that is really a big problem for getting them to be used. And our recommendations are you got to have buses that actually function well. The third part of the bus discussion, transit discussion, is going to be what does the structure of the bus system look like in general, and there are going to be multiple options that we'll bring to you in terms of case studies, but community ownership, continued ownership by the mountain that serves then with community input and contribution, or outsourced with a performance standard basically that says we want this bus system to run like this, you deliver this vendor, and we chip into it as we appropriately need to. Benefits and costs, all those different things. There's positives and negatives, each one of those alternatives. But at the end of the day, a community like Waterville Valley cannot get out of having some significant role to play in making sure you have a transit system. It's absolutely critical. That link, whether it's a gondola or it's a bus, between the mountain and the community is essential. And our recommendation is going to be geared towards finding ways to not only enhance its utilization by those who are staying here, lodging and all that, but hopefully get more locals to try to use it if they can, to get cars off the road between here and the mountain. If you're going to pay as a community, or contribute as a community to a transit system, it would be really nice to be able to use it in an effective way. So we think that some of the strategies towards consolidating the bus stops, making them more friendly and more inviting and more reliable will help locals decide that actually, if I know the bus is going to be there around 8:15, I get up at around 8:30. If I can count on that, I'm going to be more likely to use it. But if it's between 8:10 and 8:45, whatever, that's just completely erodes the ability for people to really use it. And that's what we're seeing. Before I forget on parking, one of the other things we've been talking about, obviously BBTS is such a huge piece of this puzzle, and obviously people come to town to visit the school. They obviously are looking at expanding their parking and maybe using some of their parking area for new structures. We have been looking at the town library site as a potential site for a small, probably 10-car parking area that would be integrated with a transit stop, perhaps, bus stop that would serve BBTS, essentially, it's right across the street. And also be a nice little parking area for people that are coming to town who want to go and use it as a trailhead to sort of head out, as a point of departure. So there may be a nice opportunity we're looking at, and it seems like there's some room there to do that. There might be some room to, have a little parking area, again, not a big one, a municipal type parking area, if you will, that allows people to park off street, go to the library if they want to do that, they want to visit the library, walk over to BBTS if they need to, or just head out on the trail, because if you keep going straight, you can head out and hit the woods. So it's an area we felt that, again, it might provide a little bit of a relief to some of that need. But also, if BBTS expands, again, I think there is some community benefit to having some parking for guests and visitors who may be visiting BBTS, because you want them to then stop at the store and have lunch or do those sorts of things. So it's an area that we've been thinking about in terms of expansion of that. And then this idea of the town center. So the policy, this is mostly going to be a policy piece of what are the uses that we think, the mix of uses that we think could make the most sense for in the town core, and how you might approach allowing for civic type functions as a way to help make that whatever develops as connected to the community as possible. Because I think and whatever happens here, whatever the mix of uses is that happens here, it does need to feel in some ways that it's not just separate from town square, but that it's actually connected to town square. So there's a real strong benefit to making it feel like it's the community center is building out. And I think one of the ways you do that, town square feels very, very open and public to people. Now there obviously will be parts of this that will be lodges, and that's fine. But some amount of public space, some amount of connectivity to the public, whether it be a transit center, whether it be a green, whether it be some sort of pathway, or any of those types of things, we think would be really helpful to connect it to it, so that it feels like it's part of the community and it's not sort of just added on to the community. So, with that being said, so we've identified, I'm going to go through the list of specific projects. You're not going to be able to read this, but I'll just kind of walk through it. So the main theme is unify our brand. This is the brand conversation. And there are 3 things that we are going to recommend that you guys do. One of them is hold a summit for key stakeholders to address elements of the town brand. So build off the work that we've been doing thus far, but have more of those conversations on your own, or facilitate in some way that let you have a better discussion about what the components of the brand need to be. Conduct a brand survey. Now this could be done or should be done not only with locals, but also with people who visited here. So again, we have this database of names that we've sent the previous surveys out. Ask them what they think of the brand. Maybe following up with some of the similar questions to this, but centered around not just the study, but a brand conversation. And study options and better integration of web and internet presence. So we have a nice library of case studies from other mountain resort communities who do a much better job of presenting a unified presence as externally than you do. And I know there are some cost implications of where you get funding sources to pay for websites and such, but you got to at some point ask the question, is that worth it? Because are we losing out because we're not communicating with one voice? And I think that's one of the things that we will bring out in terms of our report is, here are how some other communities have done this. Can you do better at being more unified? Can you make it easier for people to want to stay at the mountain or go to the mountain, find a place to stay, and know what's going on in town at the same time? I mean, that's the objective, is that somebody comes to a place, they can go, oh, it's Chowderfest and the mountain's doing bike races and I can do all these things. And it's really convenient, it's easy to say. There's not conflicting information between one website and the other, and there's not, in some cases, complete, lack of understanding, nothing mentioned on the other website, so you don't actually have that cross-pollination. So those are 3 big areas that we'll have recommendations towards. Create the arrival. This is that welcome to Waterville Valley conversation. So entry sign, location options. Again, the purpose of the study is not to give you the construction documents to implement, but it's going to visually explore, and with some policy language in terms of where signs should go and such, the kinds of things you should be thinking about for entry signage. And those will include, I can guarantee you, they will include discussions around you need something you can put banners on, so that you can swap out your branding on a seasonal basis or periodic basis as appropriate. So if you're having a big festival, the banners as you arrive to town should say that. It's like Chowderfest or Arts Fest, or pick a festival, or the 5K run or whatever it is. You need to be able to shout that earlier, and not wait till they all get into the middle of town to figure that out. And an overall signage wayfinding strategy. Again, this is a project into itself. I mean, communities have to go through a long, and I can tell you, as much as you will have as a planning board, have a lot of conversations around what's good and what's bad in terms of signage. But again, from a hierarchical perspective, we will provide you guidance as to where we think you should focus on signage, the arrival sequence for people. Like, this is the first point of connection, key decision point here, key decision point here. Make sure signs talk about, all those identified key places in town that we've actually surveyed towards. Make sure people can find those things and can find them conveniently, so there's no question. I use the Ray Center as an example. Now, the Ray Center moved to Town Square because they wanted to be more proximate to the center of town. The reality is, walking from Town Square to the rec center is not like it's not the Bataan Death March. It's not that far. And a lot of, I think, what the challenge that the community has is just letting people know you take a nice stroll on a nice sidewalk, or take your bike over, and it's literally 2 minutes away, and you can get to it. That's the thing that you can promote with a good wayfinding and signage program. It's not going to be inconvenient for you to get there. You don't have to move everything to the one spot. So there'll be discussions around that. There'll also be some discussions about making sure that the whatever signage and sort of wayfinding approach you take has to reflect the brand you guys ultimately kind of settle in on. You don't want, again, one of the big criticisms or critiques of the current signage program is it's basically all over the place. Not just in terms of visual qualities, but literally all over the place. And getting some uniformity to the signage program speaks a lot to how the community sort of sees itself. If you're going to have somewhat uniformity, it can be flexible. You can have different sizes, you can have different forms, but they all have to be built around a family of design elements and sort of iconography and all those sorts of things that really help to promote whatever your brand is. The next, so the experience for people arriving is also really, and sort of staying and arriving here is also really important. So we're looking at, we're doing a streetscape concept for Village Road. So this is going to explore what it could look like. Doesn't get into the specifics of whatever a development plan is, because that's going to have to do its thing. But in general principles, the kinds of things you should be thinking about in terms of the streetscape presence along Village Road, for example. Where sidewalks are best placed relative to the roadway, as an example. The type of lighting that would be most appropriate in that context. The type of streetscape presence, street trees and spacing of those things, and all of those sort of visual elements. How do they come together to create a sense of experience? That's going to be part of that's what we're working on right now. The parking studies for course, so we're looking at a couple different parts of that. One is to do a sort of a shorter term plan that would explore how do you take the existing surface parking lot and actually make it function better, maybe get a little bit more space out of it, and make it look better. So again, in long-term development plans, obviously a lot's going to change in the core, but in the shorter term, is there something we can do to make that appearance of the parking lot be more attractive? It can actually be more efficient, because our team has looked at it, and there's a lot of inefficiencies in the way that parking lot's all broken up into little tiny pieces, and I can just imagine the plowing is an absolute nightmare. So we wanted to explore those elements of it. The other thing we're looking at, again, talking about the parking garage, there is, a parking structure or municipal parking. There is a need to look at that, and the one foundational question we have is where could it go that provides the most value to the community and the overall development process. And so obviously there's an opportunity to put it onto the undeveloped core lands, because that's clearly an opportunity. There is potentially an opportunity to put it in some place proximal to the ice skating rink. And we're looking at that as another possibility. And that could start out as a surface lot and just go up from there. And the benefit of the ice skating rink side is, a couple benefits to the ice skating rink side, is it would allow for that parking, that municipal, with a small m and quotes around it, municipal parking to be very proximate to the traditional commercial center of town. So that's actually maybe more convenient for people, so they don't have to walk across the road. It also, quite honestly, might hide the ice skating rink, which is not the most attractive of structures, and presumably you could do something in the design of a garage that actually helps to improve that quality. We will have examples in the report of other communities, how they've approached garages and how they've made them look good, because there are good examples. But we'll obviously that's going to be part of that. We think that's an important thing for you guys to think about as you kind of move this forward. And then the night lighting strategy. The night lighting strategy is going to be a lot of policy stuff. So there's a lot of other communities in the United States, the mountain resort communities, who've done dark sky compliancy relative to their lighting standards, and that's fine. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of communities made, and I think you guys may have made it, is equating dark skies with dark, and it's not the same thing. I mean, dark skies even through a dark skies ordinance, it does allow you to light your community where you need to light it. And I think one of the things that we will recommend is reducing the heights of poles over time. This doesn't have to be done immediately, obviously, but as a strategy, reducing the heights of poles and making sure you're really basically illuminating the pedestrian system and not the vehicular system. You really don't need to light the roads as much as you think you do. Key intersections, possibly. Signage, directional signage for lodges and other sort of places of destination need to be lit so people can actually see them when they arrive at 4:30 in January. But you don't need to light the roadways per se, because the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic that you're dealing with doesn't really have the need for that. And if you do these pedestrian crossings, as we're going to describe, there's going to be lights associated with those crossing points as well. So it's really it's sort of flipping the strategy to make sure you're illuminating towards pedestrian uses first and primarily. That gets the lights down lower, gets the light levels down lower in general, because you don't need to have as much, and you can hopefully, by doing that, you'll get a better presence, a visual presence. You're not going to get this sort of sense of over illuminating. So that'll be a part of our discussion. We talked a little bit about the town center thing, so again, we're just going to provide some language and some recommendations about the kinds of uses that you'll want to think about for civic functionality. Pedestrian crossings, so VHBSE group is working on a series of studies of different crossing approaches, crosswalk approaches, with some recommendations about which ones we think are the most appropriate for you. You know, this will achieve this will achieve that. And this is the sort of the basis for that conversation. The re-engage your waterfront concept, again, that's going to be a building upon that studying of Snows Brook area, those possible connections and what those might be, why they might be valuable. And one of the things that we've been talking about internally is the idea of a new bridge crossing, a new crossing, let's just put it that way, not a crossing, not a bridge necessarily, a crossing of some sort. It could be a rope bridge. It could be a hand cart that you pull yourself across. There's a number of things that other communities have done that are actually very interesting, that are not sort of alternative crossings, and they're not simply just another bridge. You have the crossing point of the dam, and that's obviously there, and it's going to continue to be there. The loss of the other bridge is obviously unfortunate, but the idea for an alternative crossing, another crossing point, we would recommend it not simply just be a means of mobility, but actually be something entertaining. And if we actually in Alaska, I don't know if anybody's been to Alaska, but up in Gerba, Alaska, they have this awesome hand cart. You pull yourself across, and a little cart across the brook, and it's a draw. People actually bring their kids, and they all take turns going across this thing, and it's a kind of a fun little thing that does the function of getting people across it, but also makes it an entertaining aspect to it. Or a rope bridge, nice, or a pedestrian bridge. So there's a number of options we're looking at that we think will be functional towards the idea of mobility and moving around, but also hopefully invigorate in and of itself some of that space down there and make it a little more enlivened. And then, let's see, the Connect Inside Out. So one of the things we're going to do is we've been looking at the trail network, and we're going to recommend diagrammatically going to recommend some areas where we think you might want to improve the visual connection of the trails to the community. So making it very clear, like for example, that idea of a parking area up by the library, having a trailhead indicator so you know where you need to go. So it's actually very clear that when you get to that point, you park your car, you get out of the car, it says this way, and it tells you how far it is, and there's some identification of that. Those are the kinds of concepts we want to create for that. The share the road piece, again, on bicycle route, so that's the on bicycle route. We're also looking at an off-road bicycle path that might be a repurposed part of the sidewalk on one side of Valley Road to allow it to serve as a learning environment in some ways for people that want to bike off road. It may go from BBTS to the school, for example, ultimately. But the idea is it gets an off-road alternative to the bike route. But that doesn't have to be terribly long, but it needs to be long enough so people feel like it's functional, it's doing something useful, but also gives people that are here who may have small kids an opportunity to feel like they can do it in a safe way. So that's actually in process as well. And then the last three are the pedestrian connectivity. So sidewalk strategic plan. This is good. This is looking at all of the sidewalks that you have in the community and telling you what we think are the appropriate structural components of the sidewalks, like where some probably should move closer to the road, so it's more effective to manage those sidewalks as opposed to having a 1-foot grass strip that you have to weed whack in the summertime in Vermont and New England, it's like every 3 hours it seems. But it just it's sort of annoying. Where you can bring the sidewalks closer to the road, where you probably should provide a little bit of buffering for safety reasons or for visual reasons. Where you might want to put new ones in. And again, the Tecumseh is going to be one that and we know there's issues with it. We know there's right-of-way issues with it, but it's worth studying what those alignments might look like so we can at least get into the record that it's something the community should think about. That's part of that. The third one is the transit. We talked a little bit about the recommendations for the form it'll take, the type of structures you might do, owners, management structures, consolidation of bus stops, and we're going to recommend where those might be based upon our estimation, and the type of service, so the red bus, blue bus opportunity. And then the link to the gondola. So we have, like I said, we have a large repository of gondola data. We just last year, or 2012, completed a study in Red Lodge, Montana, for Red Lodge, the town of Red Lodge, which is a little city. Gondola study that they were looking at to connect them to the mountain. A very similar, almost like textbook to Waterville Valley in distances and stuff. And we have some really relevant data that was collected as part of that study that we obviously will fold in here because it's very current and very useful. But it goes to the ideas of cost. It gives you some ideas of what these things cost. It gives you some ideas about the design parameters that need to be thought about. And I think that's all relevant information that needs to be shared, so you guys have that at your fingertips. So, any questions thus far? Wow you with my PowerPoint presentation.
Actually, one parking issue that had come up earlier in our meeting today was private parking. And I assume in the whole circle of what you're addressing that you'll focus on that a little bit too.
Private, yeah.
As far as what our rules and regulations are.
Yeah. So, for example, it would probably be silly to go back and retroactively change all the parking requirements outside the core. I mean, everything else is pretty much, BB-Test may be an exception, but everywhere else in town is largely built out, and the form that those uses are taking, parking is not as critical. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to put a single-family house out, you need to have adequate parking for a single-family house, and I think your regulations probably get to that. The core area, though, the undeveloped portion of town, I think that's where we might suggest maybe some different approach to parking specifically, because you have, I think as a community, you have, like I said, identified municipal needs there that are important, I think, considerations. You also probably ultimately will have some involvement with parking in some capacity, whether it's just reviewing it or it's actually participating in it. I think it's really, I can definitely see the core area having, perhaps actually having a different parking requirement than the rest of town. So that's just a, you know, I think that, and that's actually very typical of when you get into a mixed use slash core area development. You sometimes have to relook at those parking numbers and say, hey, you know, what we've typically done over parks this place because it just takes all these uses and aggregates and adds them together. Whereas what the reality is it's a shared parking environment with an integrated transit system, and you get people riding by bus, and there's no cars associated with that. So there's different things that go on in a more mixed use core that allow you to have a different parking requirement. So just to recap, what's your question?
I guess I was just gonna cut to the chase. We're up against the gun on making any zoning changes.
Yep.
Are you gonna recommend that we make any zoning changes this in the immediate future?
I think one of the things you'll see in the report will be a recommendation for zoning change relative to parking. Yep. And you'll see zoning change recommendations for uses, allowable uses within the core area primarily. We're gonna want you to push that. I don't think we're not going to get into density discussions, quite frankly, because it doesn't really, it applies obviously, but it's not the thing that this study is really concentrating on, quite frankly. But I think it is appropriate looking at the parking part of it and looking at the use allowances there, because those things drive it. The other piece of the policy I think that we will recommend, and this may not be something you need to do through zoning necessarily, but you may look at amending your town plan, is to make sure the town plan has for whatever value you find in this study, one of the recommendations I think would be to take the elements that you think are really appropriate and amend your town plan so that it actually speaks to those things. Because you want the town plan to be in advance of your zoning. You want the town plan to speak to what the zoning should be. And if you start to find yourself getting divergent, like is the zoning further out in front of the town plan, then I would strongly encourage that you sort of stop that and get the town plan amended. Because that's the town plans are foundational to everything. It should be foundational to your zoning and all your regulations.
What about signage?
Signage, yeah.
Zoning changes for signs?
Signage, we will provide some zoning recommendations for placement, like where we think they should be placed relative to the public right-of-way or private land. We're looking at that. We're also looking at allowing you guys, like, to go back and look at your sign regular, let's try to look at that, but, illumination of directional signs, for example, is an appropriate thing. And there are recommendations we can provide that provide you some guidance on that. Because you don't want signs that are directing people to lodges to be invisible at night. It doesn't serve anybody's use. You get people driving around and looking for things. And so you've got to have some, you got to allow that to happen. Internally illuminated versus sort of the external, there's obviously some debates over that, and we'll provide you what we think is the most appropriate.
And what's your time frame for getting those changes?
We'll have, again, this will be part of the document, so we will have everything.
But I can't remember what.
The draft will come out mid-November, and then the final will be in January. I mean, I would presume if you felt that there was anything in the draft you wanted to pursue, you could pursue that, then that's fine. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, we would need to with the timeline.
Yeah.
Is there any way to even tweak it? Because we're just thinking about our meeting schedule for planning board.
Yeah.
It would be nice if we could have a discussion for our November meeting.
When's your November meeting?
It's
Second Thursday.
13th.
Yeah, we will have it to you then. Before then.
Before then,
Yeah.
okay.
We'll have it to you, at least we can have it to you before then. Yeah.
Great.
And I'll triage it so you actually get the benefit of the policy language first, so you can get that
Okay,
going.
good.
Yeah.
That's critical.
We had a little discussion in that telephone conference meeting we had about, or at least I did, about things in this your report going to be classified. These things should be accomplished sooner than some of these others.
Yeah, in broad
Yeah,
terms,
yeah.
yeah. There's two. It's good. Thanks for reminding me. There's three things that we're going to prepare for all these different elements. So obviously, some of them are. There's two categories: projects and policies. So the projects are like, here's a study of parking at the library. It's meant to help evoke, hey, think about this, and here we've studied it physically, and it seems like it could work. There's obviously going to be caveats that there's lots to do to get, there's, we don't want to have utility easements. There could be all sorts of stuff that need to be thought about. But the idea is that at this scale of study is to sort of bring those ideas into the conversation. So that's one thing. The second one is policies. That goes to zoning recommendations for zoning language changes or policy prescriptions. Like, you guys should amend your town plan to deal with these 3 things. That's a policy level thing. Or you should conduct that brand summit so you can actually have a substantive conversation around what the hell you want, what the town to do. The other part of that is of some broad recommendations of what should come first. And I can tell you, what's coming first right now is going to be, you can pursue these sort of structural minor tweaks on signage and lighting and things like that, and that's not going to necessarily hurt anything in the overall trajectory. But to really get the revitalization effort really kickstarted, you need to have the brand conversation. You need to get that conversation, going and actually get on the same page with everybody. Because ultimately, the structure of all this needs to look like that we would recommend. It's not simply the developer comes in and says, "Here's what we're going to do, and let's build this town together." The community and the developer need to work together in a very collaborative way around some principles, some core principles that allow for it to be effective and realized. And so whether it's Bill and the Waterville company doing the development or somebody else doing the development, having that structure in place that lets them know they're not in it alone. The community is committed to seeing this happen, but seeing this happen in a concerted way with some parameters is really key. And the brand conversations there. A lot of the other things that we're recommending will follow from building some of the infrastructure to support revitalization. And I'll just put this out there. A lot of communities who have been faced with big piece of land, ready to go, nothing happening yet. They want to kickstart it. They create downtown development authorities. They create urban renewal authority. There's all sorts of names for it. It's all, There's corporations that are built around revitalizing downtowns, and that stuff, as sometimes esoteric as it is, actually can be very important because it can provide the community with a voice within the process, which is helpful. It can provide the developer with an ally in the process, and it can also help leverage different resources for financial resources that you can't get if you're just sort of waiting for the developer to do something. So I think there will be some recommendations that will point you in that direction because, I again, speaking for myself here, I'm not going to speak for VHP, but we do see there is a prospect. There's a very good prospect for the long term for you guys. I mean, you have a lot of amazing attributes that are undersold in my mind to the public at large, and really could be enhanced in some ways. And one of the ways to enhance that is to make sure you're all working off of the same game plan. And I think getting some structure to the relationship would actually be good. If you do this as a developer planning board project, I don't think it's actually going to be as successful. I think that loses some of the synergy, some of the commitment of the community into the outcome. I mean, if you're just simply responding to what a developer's doing in terms of a project, you may be defending the regulations, and you may be defending the town plan, but you're not necessarily being a proactive partner in that. And I think you look at the case studies we provide. Most of the successful ones have been situations where it's been a community has gotten in connection with a development company to really create. Look at the vision, establish the vision, clarify it, and work in a collaborative way towards the outcome, not simply responding to the outcome. Particularly important with your guys' community because last I knew, the Forest Service wasn't giving away any other land. It's just you're pretty much it. Yeah. So you don't have anywhere, and this is it. And I think that's even more compelling argument to have the community not just sitting on the sidelines, sort of watching and waiting to see what happens, but actually try to be in part of the process.
Mark, have you ever come upon, like you're saying, having everybody kind of get on the same page and work together?
Yeah.
Have you ever come upon an instance where, let's say, one of the parties doesn't want to partake in?
Oh yeah.
You do. And do you have ideas as to how to proceed without that viable part?
Well, the way I would recommend to do that, and we can put this in the report, but the way I would recommend, if it is not possible, for whatever, politically or for whatever reasons, for the community to be partner with the development, the way that I would approach it is this, is that you make sure that your vision, your master plan, and any of the supporting regulations that come out of there cook into it some level of flexibility. Because if you have so much rigidity in your thinking around what the outcome's going to be, it's going to be loggerheads the entire way. And I think that's just the reality of the beast. You have to, I mean, you cannot pin a developer down today and say, what are you going to do in 10 years? They don't know. They can't answer that question with a straight face. And if they do tell you what they're going to do, they're probably lying. Because they can't, they're subject to market considerations, they're subject to cost considerations. They really have to be more, they have to have more flexibility in their thinking. So I would argue what you really want to do is you want to make sure the town plan and any of the regulations get to core principles. What are the most important things? But leave some of the back and forth on the details to later. But agree on the core principles and have those relatively communicated. So whoever's developing it, let them know this is what we are going to expect when you come to see us with a project. And these are the core principles that you need to respond to. X, Y, Z. Connection, transportation needs to be a big part of your plan. You need to provide some civic space within the core. We need to be able to, we don't want to create a wall that we can't see the mountains from. Some basic things like that that are very clear and that clear in and of themselves, and that you can then let the flexibility happen. How do they address that? Can be more flexible. If they say I can do it this way or I can do it that way, I would, if I was on a planning board in your circumstance, I would want to have that flexibility so I can sort of see those options presented to me.
Getting more to the point, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If we have, basic bottom line, we have the mountain, they do their own thing. And we have the village, and the people within the village. And there seems to be no connection between the two. How do we improve that? That, without us, they don't exist. And without them, people wouldn't come here.
Right.
And there's not this cohesiveness
Right.
that we're getting.
Yeah, well, and I think it goes back to some of the recommendations we are going to be providing. The unification of brand is a big part of that. I mean, I think it really comes down to actually sitting down with Chris and his team, and sitting down with the town, and sitting down with Matt and Bill, and pick some people in a room and saying, I mean, I can't speak for Chris, but I can say, he's selling product. He wants to sell as many tickets as he can. Anybody that owns that mountain wants to sell lift tickets.
That's right.
Regardless of who it is. You may not be happy with all the investments that have been made, but that fundamental reality exists. They want to sell lift tickets. So in order to sell lift tickets, they got to go out to market with a message. And I would argue that if you actually have an aligned message, that would promote better connectivity in and of itself. If you actually know that how the world perceives Waterville Valley is now not just, it's an easy out for you right now. It's easy to blame the mountain for all its woes because you don't actually have the connection with them. But all of a sudden, if you're going out to market with, this is Waterville Valley, town, mountain, lodges, hiking, all this sort of stuff, as one thing, you're in the same bed. You have to start. You're gonna have to start, having that conversation. And I think that has to be part of the calculation to do. The other part of it is the bus. Is that you have, again, whatever structure you guys feel is the most appropriate for Waterville Valley. That's a basis for that conversation around the bus. Like, we want this to work better for Waterville Valley. So how do we make that happen? Do we take it over and work with you to change the relationship there? And maybe that's a plus. Maybe that's a positive thing, because it gets them out of the business of actually operating a transit system and gets them better in the business of actually making sure their guest experience is better. So I'm just, there's not going to be a magic bullet that you can use to do this. But I think the first and foremost rule is don't create silos that prevent you from talking with each other. And right now, you guys are very siloed in your very parochial in your thinking. And I think the more you break apart those silos, the better the overall community will be. I mean, the dysfunction between mountain resorts and mountains is, that's gone on since they've formulated. There are lots of good examples and there's some really bad examples, but the one I like that actually works pretty well is Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They have a very good integration between the town and the mountain, and again they market Jackson Hole. It's Jackson Hole. It's one thing. Now there is a community and there is a mountain and there's not the same people. Well, some of the same people, but there's definitely there's distinctions between those two communities. But if you go online and you're looking for Jackson Hole, there's seamlessness between those two things. And I think Telluride is another good example. Telluride is you go to Telluride, it's Telluride, town of Telluride, mountain Telluride. I don't even know if people know the distinction between those two things. So you really have a lot to do. I was actually out in Mount Crested Butte last week in Colorado, and there's a town of Mount Crested Butte and a town of Crested Butte. Mount Crested Butte is where the mountain is, and they've been really working hard over the last decade to improve their relationship, and they had to because they realized that anybody coming down the road from Gunnison, they could care less where the boundary is between Mountain Village and it's the destination. It's the place they're coming to. They don't want to hear this distinction about that's the mountain and this is the town. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So the guest experience, the sort of the visitor experience, the presence in the marketplace trump all of those things as far as people that are coming here think about. And I think the more you recognize that, the more you realize it's appropriate to say, I'm going to park my concerns about what the mountain's not doing and is doing in the favor of finding ways to make sure we're externally communicating as positive and as consistent a message as possible. I think that's really, that's a really important piece. If you undermine the mountain, talk bad about it, it doesn't help you. It really doesn't. And it might be easy to do. I mean, it's a piñata. You can keep hitting it if you want, but it doesn't help you at the end of the day. What really does help you is realizing that there is a huge value to that mountain, to the community, and that you got to kind of come back to that. It's again from the first survey, people moved up here because BBTS, and that doesn't exist without that. So part of the reason everybody's here is because of the mountain. So that's a good realization. So I would, we have some pretty fun case studies of the relationship between mountains and mountain communities that will provide you with. It's good for, if nothing more, it's entertaining to read. But it really, and I think that goes back to your question that one of the ways we're presenting this project, all of these things, we're trying to find relevant case studies that are, that make sense to you, and relevant to the town, because we want to make sure that anybody that picks up this document sees the fact that you guys aren't doing this this isn't the first time these things have come up, across the country. You're not dealing with issues that have been so unresolved that no one could ever possibly resolve them. I mean, every one of the things you guys are going through, somebody else has gone through, in a mountain community primarily. And we're going to find examples east and west, and just sort of give it, there is some similarities. Like I said, there's a lot of similarities between the issues you guys go through here that happen in Colorado and Wyoming and Montana. But there's also similarities, like with the bus system, how Loon does it. Loon is a good example of how some of the bus strategies that may be applicable here. Cranmore has got some examples of things that might be helpful. So we're going to provide in all of the documentation of some of those case studies, so you actually can see. It's like our recommendations, SC Group, VHB's recommendations, case studies to help you frame those conversations.
Sounds like we're going to have a very thick document.
Oh, it's getting big. I'm going to figure out how to make. I mean, it is going to have an executive summary that you can pull out and sort of keep as a standalone thing. We know that's really important. But it will be thick. We're already up to 40 or 50 pages at least, 11 by 17. So
there'll be digital copies of.
Oh yeah.
Can we actually also get copies, or will this be somewhere
Yeah.
for us to?
PowerPoint?
Yeah. I can send
Awesome.
that to Tom. You guys.
Good. Thank you.
So all this material goes into the report. So the report basically documents this project from the day we first met till they're done, and it goes from the initial public engagement stuff, stakeholder discussions, the community summarizes the community surveys, summarizes all the public outreach pieces, builds the themes, builds the issues and opportunities, and analysis, and builds the issues and opportunities, and then presents the recommendations as we go to the end. So it really is, it does build as a single thing, and it walks people through the process. So I think that'll be helpful. We also try to avoid in this type of document a lot of a lot of prose. So think USA Today versus the New York Times in terms of writing, because people, again, you're gonna throw a 60-page document to somebody. The last thing they want to do is read 60 pages of 3-column text. So we try to focus in on the most salient points. But there will be appendices to the document that will have things like the traffic study and some of these other, and the survey result, the complete survey results and all that. If anybody wants to dig into it, they can do that. Okay. And then just as a budget update, we are tracking on schedule, on budget, so I think we're in good shape there.
Good.
Any other questions?
Thanks for driving over.
No.
Yeah,
Actually,
thanks.
just so you guys know, we are meeting today. We're going to talk with Bill after this, right? In 4 minutes. We're meeting with Bill, and then we've got a meeting with Matt Hasser. Matt wanted to just get, we're trying to get previous stakeholder discussions to sort of get them up to speed, get their thoughts, and we'll walk through some of these same things with them.
And Chris.
And Chris Sunu, yeah, this afternoon, Chris Sunu. So we're trying to use that stakeholder group to help us bounce off these ideas, get some feedback, and see if there's any, what the reactions are. That doesn't mean we'll necessarily change our opinion, but we it's important to listen and actually get some of the flavor of the nuance. So with that, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This kind of wanders
Oh,
that's cool.
As a crosswalk idea they were doing there.
That's neat.
That we saw what she saw.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you could,
I know it.
we get Rebecca to Rebecca.
I'm just thinking.
It ended up pretty good.
Okay. Are you?
Is there, if we think about a meeting in December, what that would look like? I usually find
Yeah, that's fine. I'll give
yeah, we don't want to get too much Christmas.
Exactly.
People don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking maybe the
Yeah, and that's part of why I'm going again.
for the weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's good snow conditions, we don't
Oh,
people
I
come
know,
out.
right? Yeah, that's.
Well, we know, but they'll, they give you good in it.
I'll let you know. I want to read the
We do
minutes
a
first.
picture.
Yeah, it will.
I'm for ski, yeah.
This is turning out to be the best.
Skiing thing.
Fun.
Yeah, so I would be
I'm
good.
hoping,
We're gonna have a lot.
yeah, we're gonna have a lot to go over.
Well, thank you again.
Did anybody want to, who's playing, would want to go to the meeting?
I'm not sure that.
Mark is going.
Yeah, I think that, and I hadn't really.
I guess we didn't even recommend anything. Okay, I guess we. Sorry. The thing is that one wetland across from the pond is big, it's 5.8 acres, and it's very, it would be almost impossible for around the pond, you know, suggesting because that's what you okay, we're ready to get back on track here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
We're not even suggesting anything wrong. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is review of zoning regulations. The first thing is signs.
Yeah, I think Bill and I were gonna go over that for November.
Okay, now I'm gonna bring something up that I think we should talk about for the zoning regulations. you go in the subdivision, and the definition of roads, if you look at on page 22 of the subdivision regulations, we have a table that has the classification of roads. And when you go to definitions, we have definitions of those roads. And I would like to clarify the internal road, what the planning board really thinks is the definition of an internal road. It says it's a street entirely within an individual subdivision, which gives access to that subdivision only.
What page you on, Ray, please?
Subdivision.
Page 6 of the subdivision regulations. A lot of these definitions of the roads, like as a local service, is a little vague too. A street used primarily to give access to the abutting properties.
Yeah, that's weird. Isn't that what streets should do? I mean-
Yeah. Well, to me, when I picture an internal street, I picture a condo association where you drive in, you got a road that you're driving on, and to the sides you have parking. Now, all of that road and parking is on that site. So now, I think this is kind of what it's leaning towards, because it says it's within an individual subdivision. Which is a little confusing to me. You know, if you have a piece of property and you subdivide out a lot, after it's subdivided, you have two lots.
Yeah.
It's no longer two subdivisions, you have one. And I'm wondering if that should say within an individual lot rather than a subdivision. We've had this discussion during our approval process with Green Peak, because the road comes in like this, and half of the road is outside their property. So when they start to develop the other half, you know, I'm looking at 20 years down the road when you gotta repave this road. Now you're talking about dealing with two individuals. You know, I don't wanna pave it, I don't wanna pay for it. And it just seems to me that an internal road is exactly what, because that road is only gonna serve that.
So it would never ever become a town road?
No, it can't,
It's,
because it's
okay,
not built.
it's not
for
built to
town.
specifications. It couldn't be anyway, there's not enough
Yeah.
land.
And I think this kind of goes hand in glove with what Bill was asking about the parking, because I think we should have that discussion too. And I don't think we're gonna get that from this report, that kind of level
Didn't sound
of
like
detail.
it did.
Not that level of detail, but you know, the key question that Bill's asking is what counts, you know? Does the planning board really think that attached garages shouldn't count as parking? I mean, that's
I
something
thought-
we've never answered.
But I thought it was leaning towards the affirmative that it should at this time of discussion when this was all going down initially, I
Well,
thought.
do we wanna change the regulations to,
Well, that's not your question, though. Your question is about internal streets.
yeah,
And I'm sorry, I guess I missed your question about the half and half, because it's,
Great.
because it sounds like that's an internal street in the sense that it's within the Green Peak subdivision.
Yeah.
Maybe, right? I just wanted to.
seems to
doesn't
me
go
that
anywhere.
Green Peak
So
should
it's
own
not-
the whole thing, so
Yeah.
that they can
So-
control their own
So
destiny.
it is
Yeah.
an internal street, right, as defined here? So I guess I'm missing, what's your question?
However, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well,
I guess I'm missing, I just wanted.
It's not clear it says individual subdivision, which gives access to that subdivision only. And
In theory, Green Peaks,
people are saying that
Will be.
these two things are the subdivision, so that it's okay to have this split road. All right?
in theory, Green Peaks could be another 3 lots on that same side of the road. And then another development come in on the right hand, where you're facing the other side of the road, completely called a different subdivision, a different
Yeah.
whatever. So
And of course,
I don't know how you, who owns what and how you, I mean,
Yeah, I know.
So you're
that's,
saying that it needs a different name if it's a street entirely within an internal set of subdivisions? Because Green Peak will now be several subdivisions?
Well,
Is that what
actually,
you're saying?
we don't know what's gonna
we
be.
don't know if it's gonna be
Are you saying it's
one
possible?
big
That's the
condo
issue.
association or 4 condo associations.
That's the problem. We get back to what we started with when this original concept came in of trying to make decisions and not knowing what you're making decisions
Well,
on.
That's
Right.
it.
But
And that's the difficult part of working a plan of sorts with some flexibility.
yeah, I know, but we can only go by what the regulations are.
I know.
And we,
So my question is, if it's within an internal subdivision or set of subdivisions, not public, what difference does it make
Right, yeah, right.
to us? And do we just need to change the definition? Or is there some qualitative content differentiation that we have to have an entirely new definition because it matters somehow?
First and foremost, Waterville Company owns that entire plot, correct? That, I'm trying to think in regards to Green Peak right now, okay? That whole undeveloped section, be it along the roadway or like if the internal road is built on the opposite side, that is Waterville property, Waterville Company property as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess if they're not, that road isn't built to town specs, and if he puts in another, let's say subdivision in that other side, I would think they'd both use that same road, which would not be approved as a town road, correct?
I think it's classified as an internal road.
Internal road,
But it only serves,
the subdivision.
right,
Because Waterville Company starts off, they own, right now they own everything. Then he sells it off to the developer, and now we're looking at that little piece that the developer's got.
Yep.
Not, the because what
We're not-
Waterville Company is left with is undeveloped.
Exactly, but we need to think ahead to,
Well, that's the problem.
yeah, I know.
Well, is the issue in the future that if the road deteriorates, the town tells them eventually you must fix it up, and we're worried about who's gonna pay for it? Is that the question?
I don't know if the town can do anything unless it becomes a safety, a safety
yeah, town can-
issue.
Or is it more, that
They've been
we're
gone for
worried
10
they won't be
minutes.
able to figure out who's paying for it?
Well, they own
I think
half
they
the road, and they wanna repave it, and they've gotta deal with an outside agent.
Somebody's gonna say at some point in time,
What do you do? I mean, if one unit, if one building set owns half and the other building set owns the other half, then they divide the cost proportionally. I guess I still don't understand the.
oh, somebody says, no,
It
no,
should be in the
no,
condo
no, I
docs
say
as
I'm not
well
doing
as
it.
your
I
declaration.
don't have half
Yeah.
the road, I'm not doing it.
So one building group says I'm not doing it, the other says they are doing it.
So you,
If it's in the condo
Why do we
declaration,
care?
they all have to do it.
Right.
but if they
don't have
build
to
it out as
agree.
separate ones, we don't know that either.
Yeah, that's a good, whether they incorporate, I would think. Again,
That's you.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
you,
yeah.
okay.
So you're worried about the tyranny of one minority, in other words, one condo association building group, saying we want everything to go downhill and everybody else wants to maintain, and we're worried that they'll wreck the lives of everybody else? Is that our worry as a planning board?
The-
No, I'm asking what.
Well, at some
You know,
point, at
that's
some
gone
point
on.
in time, this is what comes back all the time, if, in my thinking, how could that have why was that let to happen? And this is the time to clarify. In 10 years, that's what people are gonna say. I'll give you an example of Garage Way, right? 3 separate condo associations,
Yeah,
we got
there you go.
3 separate driveways. One, you're like bushwhacking on the road. I mean, it's so, and
They're not all.
that association says, we're not spending any money. It's fine with them,
Where's this?
Garage Way.
Yeah, that's
So
a
I'm
good-
just saying that, we already know some of that exists, so.
That-
Let
That's
me
a
ask
good
a
example
question.
because even in Mountain Meadows, they have to go on Rides Way to get to their condos.
their
so
access,
they're on
exactly.
somebody else's, so.
Yeah, they have no access unless they go on a,
And we get into that paving thing, and we'll pave, but the next guy says, no, I'm not gonna
Now,
pave.
question, Forest Knoll, those were built in phases, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are the guys of those condos under one?
No.
No.
They're
Two.
not.
This Forest Knoll one is the first building.
Okay,
They've stayed
So we
by
are faced
themselves.
with
They
that then.
refused to
Okay.
join the rest of the condo association. The other 6 buildings are a separate association. And a couple of years ago, we had that issue
Yep.
where
And
we
what happened?
repaved the driveway and they paid 1/7. They agreed to do it. It wasn't easy getting the money
Yeah.
out of them, honestly.
well, I know yeah.
But they ultimately agreed to do it and paid up their share.
Okay. So you might be
Now,
faced.
there must be a lot line there, right? There must be a
Yeah,
lot
they
line.
have to.
The first one.
Yeah.
on a
Yeah, there
separate
are.
lot.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so you got a common driveway that
We have a
shares.
common driveway for the first
Well, I
one.
guess that
Right.
problem is
It's gonna be,
throughout the town.
yeah.
So, I mean, I just think the planning board, you know, maybe it's not our obligation, but it would be a good thing to clarify the language.
Well, that's why I'm
Yeah.
bringing it up.
Yeah.
You know, it just seems like if you give the condo their own, if they own it, then they can do whatever they want with it.
Maybe if you just took out the word individual.
No, I think that would make it worse.
Well, I don't know, but then both
Within
condo
subdivision.
associations, it's within a subdivision.
Are we looking at changing the zonings on something that we don't even know is gonna happen? I mean,
Sure.
why are we?
It's
looking
already
at this?
happened.
But it's not quite the same, I mean, that is an internal road. What- I guess I'm confused. So your initial concern I heard was that the road, like Deborah Way, is split midpoint, but like Forest Knoll. Well,
Forest Knoll.
Is that initial driveway, that's not split down the middle, or is it?
No, but that's the same
But it's
problem.
a similar thing, but it's not because of where the property line lies.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding if you're getting on Green Peaks, the road.
Yeah,
If you're driving down the road,
right.
half belongs.
Right,
Like
and I
where a
remember
yellow
this has
line
come up
would
like
be.
a half a dozen times
Yeah.
before, and there's always been a reason as to why it's okay.
Well, it could
But
be
I
because of
understand
the
what
vagueness
Ray's
of
saying,
this.
if we wanna keep their road defined as this internal street, it needs to say entirely within an individual subdivision or logical grouping of subdivisions, which gives access to that subdivision
I think
or
that
grouping of subdivisions
logical
only.
grouping
Right.
makes a big
Because-
difference.
Because it is a logical grouping, they're all named
Yeah.
Green Peak and they all have to work
Well,
together.
my
or they're
understanding
all
when I bought the
Forest
house
Knoll.
is that all the buildings were gonna belong to Green Peak.
Well, you can't control what the future is gonna look
Right,
like.
right,
You're
exactly.
not in charge of that.
But the grouping.
I think any road that's gonna service something, a group of condos or whatever, that whole road ought to have a definition to where it's, who it belongs to or what it is or whatever. I mean, starting to split roads in half is,
But
you
that,
split it in half this way, and then the next thing you know is further down at the end, when a new development comes, that'll belong to these people.
but,
You know what I mean?
but the
Yeah,
thing
You might as well play
is-
hopscotch on what the road boundaries are.
And you're right, we don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
We don't
No.
know whether there's gonna be 4 condo associations or combine it into
And
one.
the developer probably, in all fairness, doesn't know
Well,
either, but
yeah.
our job is to try to make some sense out of something, I would think.
So you're suggesting that we don't let developers split a road and that it has to be wholly owned, these internal streets, by a single condo association?
Well, that's kind of what I
Well,
think that's
that
trying
sounds like
to
what you're
say.
suggesting.
Well, or that, or having a way that the road, I don't know, it's totally,
If it
It is-
remains an internal road and it's not owned by the town, to me, it would be up to the condo associations, be it the grouping or whatever, to deem what happens to that road.
No, I don't know, Moose Run, isn't part of that all privately owned? So
Yeah,
how do
part
all
of it's
the-
owned by the condo association because the town wouldn't take it over.
That-
because
that
it wasn't
loop,
built
right,
to town
Nancy?
standards.
but it's all independent homeowners who could either gang up on each other or not as far as repaving it, so it's a similar situation?
Yeah.
Well, that circle, you know, when you go
Right,
to the.
yeah.
But-
That's,
Yeah.
right,
but does
Lot
that,
lines go to the middle of the road. And that circle
Right,
is
so-
considered a driveway that serves four
right,
houses.
so that's similar to what we're talking about.
Sharon's got the word to say.
Absolutely
Yeah.
different.
I believe the lot lines on the Green Peak units presently do go to the center of the road.
Right,
right,
right.
So whoever would construct on the other side would virtually have the same measurement.
Exactly.
And it would be internal and amongst them.
Right.
So
I think the grouping,
the cat's out of the bag. We can't retroactively fix.
oh, no, you can't do
Oh,
that.
no.
Horrible problem.
So I like the way
So-
that you had suggested that wording, Nancy.
yeah,
So
me
now we
too.
have to just say it's an individual subdivision or a logical grouping of subdivisions.
I think that is a good word, logical grouping.
Why don't we just?
I
do
think
that?
that's great.
Okay. I see now what you're saying, which makes sense.
Well, they're trying to get some answers from us, and, I think we should talk about that parking too, because I don't think we're gonna get that from the study. Do we want garages to count?
Wish I had my old notes, because I know that was a big issue, especially when it went from the middle unit not having a double garage, remember, in the parking
Mhm.
and the overflow parking. That was such a major issue with the planning board.
Right.
I have a little bit of a problem if a developer is gonna build 3 attached units, and now we're talking about parking, and you've got a 2-stall garage, so you're gonna have, 2 limited common parking spaces in front of those doors. That belongs to that unit owner to use. And then wait a minute, and then let's say you have a building that doesn't have any garages, but for the developer's convenience, the parking spaces in front of this new condo are gonna be common areas.
Yeah.
Cause he wants to have
Something.
flexibility so he can,
Yeah,
but what happens with the homeowner? I mean, I guess if you're gonna foolish enough to buy that unit, and you understand that I could go and park there,
Yeah.
and they can't, even though they own the place, seems ridiculous to me.
it does. And that's why I don't understand
Yeah,
why
this
that,
limited is something new. We've never faced that before.
Do our regulations need to require 2 limited common area spaces per unit, whether they have garages or not? Is that more to the point? So that we know that each unit has those dedicated 2 spaces at least, and if there's a garage, then they have them more?
A minimal requirement.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
But then
would make sense, but.
But if that were true, if each unit had 2, and 3 of the owners weren't there, and somebody else had a guest, they couldn't park in a free spot.
Well, you have to assume that there's some communication between
no.
neighbors.
Yeah.
you know
Like
something
a
though,
holiday.
when we owned at
I
Boulderwood,
guess it's fire beware.
when we owned at Boulderwood, we had, as you know, there are 2 units, and here's 1 unit and here's 1. You could only park like in front of your unit, and you'd have to be, it was called creative parking, believe me, because all of our kids at that point had cars, so we would stack and then we'd put 2 in the back, so that, and that's the way it was.
That parking was all open, you could park any place you want.
There's not much parking up at
No, but it wasn't a
No, but I'm just
sign.
saying,
Yeah,
you could
yes.
go
It wasn't a
anyplace.
sign.
But nobody infringed on anybody else's parking,
No, I
is
understand
what
that.
I'm trying to
I
say.
understand that.
Am I understanding that we do not count the garages as parking spots?
Yeah, right.
In the regulations right now, but
I
that
think
should-
that should be
Steve, we
like,
talked about that
I-
a few years back, and
and
it,
Green Peak.
the reason it was done that way, from what people were telling me before I was on the planning
But
board,
that's their choice.
is the fact that in the old days, people came and they had a garage and they put all their stuff in the garage,
Well, yeah.
and there wasn't room for a car. So they said, if this is going to be really a,
That's not,
But that's their choice.
that's their choice,
Well, no, no, but
exactly.
You could put your boat or your trailer or whatever in your
Right.
parking spot.
But it
too.
should
I
be
understand that,
counted
but what all I'm
as a
getting at
spot.
is what was good back then, now it is different.
Right.
I personally think a garage should count as a parking.
I
space.
agree. That's why I said, remember when he said 2 and then 2, 2, 2, and I said 6?
Mhm.
Because I think that the 2 inside should be counted.
Then do we get to the point, is the other issue if there's a garage and a parking space, are those the 2 that are covered by the regulations? And was there some
Yeah,
debate
right.
whether that was enough?
No, it really reduced it.
Right, so,
And if we say the garages count, then there's, could be no exterior parking.
right. Right. So it makes
You could
sense.
say, you could say a garage counts for half a space.
Or towards overflow, like if there are a percentage of spaces that should be overflow, can a garage?
Every time you get into overflow parking with a developer, they hate it because they're wasting land.
Yeah.
Well, and we don't want either of those, we want to pave everything. And
True.
I think in a certain, we're kind of on the same
Yeah.
page, just for different reasons.
Well, overflow parking doesn't even have to be paved, right?
No.
I mean, you could have a
Well,
space
it
in
doesn't-
between the two condo
It
buildings
has- it has to
No,
be-
that may not have trees or whatever, but,
Right.
you know, I mean, in a,
it
If they're
has-
gonna plow it.
has to be a hard surface.
does,
Doesn't have to be paved.
Have we posed this garage question to our consultants? Because I
I don't know,
don't know.
not specifically.
I don't think
It's-
they're
I
gonna
think
get
it's
into
in
I
the
don't
reg-
think it's
in the
part
reg-
of the study though,
It's in the
unfortunately.
regulations.
But I
and
mean,
if
just
it-
as just to get their feedback on, because they might have some answers or at least some idea of what other communities do that they could just give us
Right.
feedback without us doing hours and
Yeah.
hours of research.
I'll definitely shoot Mark an email and just say, you know, what we're wrestling with and,
Okay, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll,
Yeah,
maybe
just-
they can at least
let's
give
get
us
some
some
advice.
guidance,
yeah.
We definitely need some.
you know. Because now we're dealing with open parking, with limited parking.
you might bring up,
garages.
you might also ask them in other communities if they've had half of a road problem as well.
Well,
But that's
Windsor
an
Hill is-
internal, I mean, it's a driveway, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
Well, Windsor Hill is, you know, Windsor Hill owns the lower half of Jennings Peak Road. So the town came and they paved the upper part of Jennings Peak Road, not what Windsor Hill owns. Does that make sense? Of course not. They should have paved the whole road.
Yeah.
They have an easement, you know.
But, well, then it
So I
would,
mean, so,
then they would have charged Windsor Hill Association for the paving.
no, because it's their easement.
Oh.
But I guess the
Another
point
problem.
is, I guess the point is that Waterville is riddled with these kind
What
of
happened up on?
split ownerships.
Well, it's because of the,
Pico, did they have,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
what
there
was
was
the
a
issue
good
there?
one.
Well, it was because there was a section
Right.
of road, the
50
town,
feet, right.
50 feet that the Waterville company owned and had back taxes on it. And so, and they wouldn't pay their taxes, so nobody could fix it, and they wouldn't fix it. And so finally, there was an agreement made, and so now it's part of the town road. But it stops at the top because all of the rest of that is privately owned by the North Face, the homes on North Face, as well as the North Face Condo Association.
The town eventually took out 50 feet, right?
Yeah, finally,
Yeah, I guess that's,
finally.
well, I guess it's
that
Don
would
would
just be
say.
some language. If the developer's gonna come in and develop parcel of property, piece of property, and put a way or a road or a street, whatever you wanna call it, there ought to be some rules about it. Period.
Well, A private road is a private road.
And then the
is a private
contractor
road.
goes into the development of developing the land with that understanding. Whatever that understanding happens to end up being, but
I mean,
at
we,
least clarify one.
I mean, honestly, if the town hasn't stepped in with Windsor Hill already, then when would the town step in? I mean,
Yeah.
we finally got our money together to fix it, but my gosh, those potholes are unbelievable. So I hear your point about, but the town hasn't stepped in.
have you guys asked the
Already.
town to take over?
No, I mean, I don't think we need to,
No?
but it's just, I'm just saying, case in point, I've never seen anything as horrendous as that, and the town never
Yeah.
stepped in to say, hey, you need to do something.
It's,
So
it's,
it's private.
with all of these little issues, it really seems, maybe it's gonna come to a point, I mean, we're talking about a brand, a unified look, and all this whatever, and we got all these little mismatches of pieces
Yeah, no,
of
it's true.
disgusting things here, or split up things in and don't make any sense, and it's like,
Well, this is the only town I've ever heard of that you don't have to have access to a public road to have a lot. That you gotta drive over somebody else's. Our regulations allow
Yeah,
4 houses off a driveway,
Yeah.
not off a public road.
yeah.
I know.
So, yeah, I guess we're riddled. So we'll do it, as Donald would say, we'll do it that way.
God rest his soul.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be nice to see if Martin does
Yeah.
have any kind of,
Yeah, it would be good. But I think what Nancy said, though, about the internal structure,
Yep.
internal street rather, I think that would be
Language,
good.
yeah.
That language would be good.
and we'll do signs next, well, you know, we're probably gonna have to have an extra meeting in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a lot on our plate.
Yeah, we've got a lot.
It would be nice to be able to digest that report and then talk about it maybe after the regular
Yeah.
meeting.
It's,
What makes sense.
I mean, if we're really gonna change any regulations, our back is up against the wall.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Really keep
Next on the agenda,
Just privilege of the floor, Tom?
nothing?
Nothing, Tom?
It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. So I'll save my commentary for a future meeting.
Thank you, Tom.
No, I think.
Thanks for being so considerate.
I think it'll have to be after the November meeting, right?
You leave another one in December,
Because we won't get the report until November.
Yeah.
Oh, so after the
We have
November.
the 13th.
and then we have Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah. that's
Yeah, you
right.
go into Thanksgiving 2 weeks
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
So when is our next meeting?
It's the 13th.
Oh, and then it's, boy, we don't have room.
No, we don't have much time at all.
No,
It'd
that,
have to
2
be
weeks
like
after that
30th.
is Thanksgiving, and then you're into December.
It would have to be the 30th, right?
Or we could squeeze
Would
it
he
in on the
give-
20th.
Would he give us a ballpark
I mean, 20th.
idea as to when that report would come?
He said before the 13th.
Yeah,
He said before the next,
Oh, okay,
before
okay.
the next meeting.
All right.
so we got the 20th we could do.
Yeah, it might be good for us to get it and have time to digest it.
These 2 dates.
20th, 13th, yeah. Okay.
Because there's a lot to do before because the December meeting has to have the public hearing. And that's gotta be noticed. So
That's the 11th,
Wait,
December, it would be the 11th.
Yeah.
in December, we have to have the public
we won't
hearing.
have enough time to notice it,
What's
would we?
that?
How long
How
before
long do we have
to
to
notice
notice
it?
it?
15 days.
15 days.
It is 15? Okay.
15 or, so, yeah, I think it's 15 in hand, I think notice is 11.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, so
So-
it's okay. We could do the 20th.
30th would work. Yeah, we just got a lot of work coming
Yeah, no.
fast.
So you, are you proposing the 20th for a public meeting?
No, no, for
Well, we'll
additional
talk
meeting.
about our
additional.
next, I'm just thinking that we got so much work, we gotta come up with the language, we gotta agree with what we wanna change.
Right.
I just want to keep the date open, so in case we're gonna plug something in, I'd like
That's
to
why
know.
I'm saying, I think it would be the 20th.
20th.
20th?
Yeah.
All right.
I won't be here.
November.
And we'll firm that up on
I will be.
the regular meeting. So what do I have here?
So keep the 20th open in
Keep the
case.
20th
In
open.
case we need that extra.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he'll get us everything on the 1st and we'll have plenty of time. But if it's the 10th.
But we won't be able to talk about it until our regular meeting.
Right. True.
We could have a workshop, I guess. Yeah, the earlier we get,
And then,
at least if we get it so that we
have
can
the
look at
CIP
it.
things.
Yeah, when I email them about the other thing, I'll also say if we get
I
anything.
think
The
it
earlier
starts
it's
November.
Especially,
I think, Sharon, when does the CIP
especially
start?
any recommendation
No.
for zoning plans.
Should be able to pull that out.
That will start in
November, right?
November.
Yeah, so we're on that too.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
The CIP, we're on,
Oh,
we were
yeah,
on the
that's right,
CIP
that's
last
right.
year. I'd like to
So
do
what-
it again.
So what is this nice thick thing?
It's already happened.
This is the report? Yeah, you can tell us about it.
No, I have one. You don't have to share. I have my own.
Can you give us the highlights on it?
I haven't gone. I'm hoping to go, I wanna go and read the notes, to the North Country Council. This is that thing that Ray Burton, and I went to one last year, and I'd like to go and see, they're talking about transportation jobs, et cetera, for the North Country. And I'd like to see, read the minutes and see what's up.
Okay, you can do that.
And then I'll know if I'm gonna go or not. But
Oh, this, I might have the flyer show you.
that's okay.
That's what it was. The way
Yeah,
that
see,
they
I
go.
have this one. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
Make
I
a
make-
motion, make a motion how we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.